If we're not running in the rat race in our common day-to-day lives, there's another race in which we find ourselves running again and again, often to the point where we say, man, why are we still doing this? But we're not talking about rats here, we're talking about wolves and sheep, we're talking about dogs and ponies. I'm talking with metaphor and analogy to represent this thing that we call politics. But let us first start by going back in history not even about 100 years ago, because you're probably familiar with an event called World War II, in which there were dictators in charge of many different countries, and there were millions of people ready to follow their orders. You can stand with any political affiliation watching this video, but we're going to be talking about the tactics used among any political individual. I'm not going to show you all the bad things that happened. In fact, I'm going to show you all the good things that happened. Because if we're going to study cults, especially destructive cults, it's important to recognize, how did so many people get fooled? How did so many people create casualty? How were so many people not able to see this coming? And what if we are doomed to repeat it nowadays?
The tumultuous aftermath of World War I, Italy was a nation in turmoil. The seeds of discontent, sown by economic strife and political instability, found fertile ground in the disillusioned Italian populace. Mussolini's fascist party, founded in 1919, capitalized on the widespread disillusionment. They promised to revive Italy's economy, restore its national pride, and stabilize the political chaos. The fascists claimed they were protecting Italy from communist revolution, which was a real fear after the Bolshevik success in Russia. Mussolini's masterful use of propaganda played a crucial role. He portrayed himself as a man of action, a leader who could restore Italy's glory. His speeches were fiery and emotive, delivered with a theatrical flair that captivated audiences to portray itself as the efficient savior of Italian society. The initial phase of Mussolini's regime was somewhat deceptive, appearing to work within the existing political framework. However, beneath this facade, the seeds of totalitarianism were being sown, portraying himself as the only one capable of restoring order. The fascist propaganda machine was a vast and complex network, encompassing all forms of media. Newspapers, radio broadcasts, cinema, and later television were all harnessed to spread the fascist doctrine. Mussolini, acutely aware of the power of media, personally took charge of the Ministry of Press and Propaganda in 1935. His voice, powerful and charismatic, became a constant presence in the lives of Italians, creating an almost mythical image of the leader. Overhauled the educational system, embedding fascist ideology into the curriculum. Textbooks were rewritten to glorify the regime and vilify its enemies. Children were indoctrinated from a young age through the Opera Nazionale Balilla, a youth organization that combined physical training with fascist indoctrination. Stark reminders of the atrocities that can be committed in the name of ideology.
Mussolini's propaganda machine churned out images of a thriving country and a virile leader. Il Duce stripped down for the camera, worked side by side with the peasants, and wrestled wild animals. Never mind that this one had no teeth. Nonetheless, it was working. Mussolini attracted fans worldwide, including Thomas Edison, Sigmund Freud, and Mohandas Gandhi.
I salute the Italians of America who are working to make America great.
Although a younger Mussolini had condemned censorship as shameful and dangerous, he now made it the hallmark of his regime.
He really did believe he was a modern Julius Caesar, a man who was going to recreate the ancient Roman Empire.
Well, over the course of Mussolini's political life in Italy, not only did he try to evoke the image that he was strong, but simultaneously, he was a man of the people. You know that classic thing that you see in politics with like candidates going around and kissing babies in front of audiences and that sort of thing? Mussolini is the guy that basically started and popularized all of that. Like literally any time there was an opportunity for a photo op, this guy would show up. Oh, were farmers out there harvesting wheat? Well, he's going to show up and he's going to harvest it with them, snap a photo. Were some guys out there building a road? Well, he was going to show up, pick up a shovel a few things of dirt, take a photo, and then leave.
North Koreans weeping and wailing, collapsing in mourning after learning of the death of Kim Jong-un.
This reaction may seem extreme to you, but to the people of North Korea, they were mourning their god. Like many colonies, they longed for independence. With the end of the First World War and all its promises of freedom, Korea agitated for its independence. The reforms were successful, and North Korea saw an incredible economic recovery in the first few years after 1945. An ideology called Juche, Juche was and remains the guiding principle of the entire country, and it essentially means self-reliance. North Korea strives to be militarily, socially, and economically capable of standing on its own 2 feet. Cooperation with fellow socialist states was welcome, but dependence undermined the country's power. Economically, this meant a rejection of international trade as the path to prosperity, and a focus on self-sufficiency. The Democratic People's Republic of Korea would strive to grow all of its own food, develop all of its own technology, and extract all of its own raw materials. Socially, it meant a thorough education in Juche ideology for all citizens, and an insulation from outside ideas that might compromise the ideological unity of the nation. One historian of North Korea described Juche as an assumption that Korea is at the center of the world. All citizens of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea must passionately love their country, and by extension, its leader. Kim was a nationalist hero, a true Korean who had fought the guerrilla fight to free his nation. For many, Kim represented Juche, self-reliance, while his enemies would submit North Korea to the powers of foreign nations. Kim himself would visit farms, factories, or other facilities to motivate workers. According to the propaganda, he would use his immense wisdom to instruct the workers how to be better at their jobs and achieve their quotas. On-the-spot guidance has become one of the most iconic parts of regime propaganda, and has been kept up by all of Kim Il-sung's successors. Roughly 27% of the population belong to the hostile class. Political prisoners, religious people, supporters of the South, or the descendants of businessmen and landlords all belong to this group. These people are not to be trusted and must be closely monitored for any hint of disloyalty or anti-communist action. The regime maintains a file on every North Korean above the age of 17 to keep track of their songbun. Good deeds might move one up the songbun scale, but moving up is much harder than moving down. Missing work quotas, committing a crime, or showing any disloyalty to the regime are always bad for your songbun. The regime kept pumping out propaganda to tell citizens that they were fortunate to live in the greatest nation on earth. The regime claimed that North Korea was a paradise, free from the miseries that affected other, lesser nations. According to school teachers, students never missed a lesson and never misbehaved. There was no such thing as alcoholism or prostitution in North Korea because everyone had what they needed and never had to stoop to such lows. Divorce? That never happened. Neither did premarital sex. The truth was that anything or anyone that made the regime look bad or questioned its image was taken out of the public eye. Some were merely hidden, but others would see the dark underside of the Kim regime. Inmates are not humans, and there are no human rights protections for anyone in North Korean captivity. With Kim's power secure, the economy recovering, society realigning along socialist lines, and all of the opponents rapidly ending up in camps or graves, North Korea entered the 1960s with everything to play for. Both Ngema and Kim Il-sung as good men who were unfairly smeared by Western propaganda. Many people were forced to migrate in desperate search for food. This was technically illegal, as the law required most people to have a permit to leave their town. But so many people had no other choice that there was no practical way to enforce the law.
김정일 동지께서 주체 2011년 12월 17일 8시 30분에 현지 지도에 길에서
Kim Jong-il had officially ruled for less than half the length of his father's reign, and unlike his father, had not thrown out any Japanese occupiers or waged any wars against its great enemies. Il's reign was also one of clear economic deprivation, of famine, and of North Korea's further decline into a pariah state, and even the laughingstock of the international community, who only got taken seriously when it threatened to destroy the world. By all accounts, Kim Jong-un was a normal kid. Apparently, he was a quiet but generally pleasant young man, and no one could have expected that he was destined to be a totalitarian dictator. He loved basketball from a young age, and remains a fan to this day, and classmates remember he was into video games too. There are 15 state-permitted haircuts as of 2017. all of them designed to be practical for the good socialist worker and free of the needless extravagance of a capitalist consumer. These laws may seem strange to an outsider, but they make sense to the internal logic of North Korea. To allow any uncontrolled aspects of Western culture to slip through is to risk the fate of the USSR or China.
Of course, I joined. It's glorious to join here. I was totally pour my energy, even my life, into it to support whatever Mao asked me to do.
Mao had decided to mobilize the young people as the driving force of a vast campaign to purify the Communist Party. There was to be a new revolution, a cultural revolution.
He was excited. We thought he was a god.
They worship Mao as their leader and follow his instructions without question. They consider long hair and Western-style clothes uncommunist.
Teachers were the target of the political campaign. Mao taught us they have to receive the re-education by the worker and peasant. My female teacher, I love. She liked to wear beautiful clothes. She cared for appearance. There was a criminal accusation. One boy went to her bedroom and lead so many people. She went there to cut her hair. I went there too late. The hair has been cut. He was humiliated. I couldn't help. I couldn't rescue her. Shame on me. I hope that they reflect, they regret, they re-examine what should we prevent this kind of human tragedy happen again.
The workers, school children and army perform morning devotions to their own particular god. This deity, say locals, has brought the village prosperity.
生在红旗下，长在红旗下。可以说，学会唱的第一首歌就是《东方红》，说认识的第一个人名就是毛泽东。
Though Mao has been dead for more than 20 years, to the villagers of Nanjie, he's very much alive and painting the town red.
在发展集体经济方面，14年经济增长2100多倍，这个速度可以说是南街村历史上罕见。
In this bastion of social purity, all the apartments are identical. The idea is that a tidy town leads to a tidy mind, and in case of any lingering spiritual pollution, the cure is a weekly dose of ideology, brought to us by comrade Wang Xiaohong. The village hires thousands of girls from the surrounding countryside to work on the production lines. They're paid $20 a month, meals and bed included. And because this is considered better than life on the farm, at the end of each shift, the girls are expected to show their gratitude.
It is an extremely contradictory event, characterized simultaneously by anti-authoritarianism and authoritarianism, freedom of speech and self-censorship, creativity and destruction, naive utopianism and cynical opportunism, hyperpoliticization and, surprisingly, depoliticization. As is often the case with many historical narratives, these narratives contain a kernel of truth. However, they don't tell you the full story, and they end up portraying a quite inaccurate picture of the Cultural Revolution, which tries to pin everything on Mao's personality and not the masses themselves. Such one-dimensional narratives, often believed by both the right and the left, completely ignore the agency of the masses themselves in advancing the most remarkable achievements of the Cultural Revolution, as well as its most destructive element. The quasi-anti-authoritarian character of Mao's Cultural Revolution is even acknowledged by some anti-communist scholars, who are at least honest enough to admit the paradox that a supposed totalitarian dictator would encourage his people to think for themselves and give them the means to rebel against his own party state. Mao encouraged popular rebellion by allowing levels of freedom and transparency that were unprecedented for China. Independent Red Guard organizations were allowed to create their own press, newspapers, publish articles against various politicians, and holding the government accountable by investigating party leaders and finding and distributing their speeches and transcripts from their meetings. Throw the emperor off his horse was a popular slogan among Cultural Revolution rebels. Hell, even the CCP under Deng Xiaoping admitted that the greatest danger of the Cultural Revolution was that it destroyed the authority of the CCP. With the Cultural Revolution, Mao wanted to reverse a pattern in Chinese political culture where independent thinking and honest opinions were discouraged. As we'll see repeatedly throughout this video, authoritarianism is not limited to state authorities. A certain anti-authoritarian authoritarianism also exists. Mao stated that, quote,
I myself had not foreseen that the whole country would be thrown into turmoil. Since it was I who caused the havoc, it is understandable if you have some bitter words for me.
While the 10 official years of the Cultural Revolution is frequently depicted as one big decade of chaos, China's GDP still grew by an average of 6% annually, which was higher than both India and Indonesia during this time. The decade of the Cultural Revolution also saw reforms that allowed students and teachers to criticize educational policies, participate in their reconstitution, and voice criticisms of their party state authorities through local party committees. Probably the most noteworthy and novel achievement of the Cultural Revolution were the efforts made to help narrow the gap between manual and intellectual labor. The idea was to help create a more self-reliant society, where people could learn all sort of different skills. Even though the division of labor can be quite efficient for productivity, it tends to create one-dimensional individuals who don't learn a lot of things outside of their field. It tends to roboticize humanity. For a few months a year, everyone was encouraged to engage in work that they had never done before. Students had to get some experience in the trades and learn some hands-on practical skills from manual laborers. And were also encouraged to get some experience working on farms with peasants. Most importantly, those engaged in manual labor were given more opportunities to study. Blue-collar workers and peasants not only got access to better schooling, they were also given progressive education through things called theory centers.
We must believe that more than 90% of our cadres are good or comparatively good. The majority of those who have made mistakes can be reformed.
为保卫祖国的领土主权，为保卫人民的生命财产，为压制人民的痛苦和争取人民的权利，贯彻人人主权，在以消灭反动军队，开化国民政府的反动统治，同时决议向祖国政府宣布，本政府为捍卫政策平等互利的互相承认领土主权，捍卫着的民主外国政府。
I would admire Mao Zedong. He has his faults, but he unified China and was a very great guerrilla leader. Mao wanted a strong China. He didn't create it, but he created a liberated China. He unified it.
Stalin was as a child, and then he's incredibly abusive. Hitler was as a child. Mao is a different event. I use the word sociopath or psychopath. I think both apply to him. Don't think he's going to have any tender mercies for anyone. He abandoned various sets of kids who starved to death and died, and one son, he put him right up in Korea where he could get killed, and he promptly did. Oh, and Stalin, that was another great one. Well, the Nazis captured Stalin's son and wanted to trade him for something, and Stalin said, nah.
We witnessed over 1 million German prisoners of war being retained in confinement for no reason at all for a whole year after the war was ended. We witnessed over 1.5 million Germans being torn away from all that they possessed in the territories lying on our frontiers and being whipped out with practically only what they wore on their back. We had to endure having millions of our fellow countrymen torn from us without their consent and without their being afforded the slightest possibility of existence. The German nation does not wish its interests to be determined and controlled by any foreign nation. France to the French, England to the English, America to the Americans, and Germany to the Germans.
Formerly, we were in the habit of saying this is right or wrong. Today, we must put the question accordingly. What would the Führer say? I tell you, if the Führer wishes it, then 2 times 2 are 5. Men carry on a struggle against nature and utilize nature for the production of material values not in isolation from each other, not as separate individuals, but in common, in groups, in societies. Production, therefore, is at all times and under all conditions social production. Man has discovered in nature the dialectic, the wonderful notion of that almighty being whose law he worships. Fundamentally, in everyone there is the feeling for this almighty, which we call God, that is to say, the dominion of natural laws, dialectic laws, throughout the whole universe. Hence the folk concept of the world is in profound accord with nature's will, because it restores the free play of the forces which will lead the race through stages of sustained reciprocal education towards a higher type, until finally the best portion of mankind will possess the earth and will be free to work in every domain all over the world, and even reach spheres that lie outside the earth. You generally have communism on the left and capitalism on the right, supposedly. Hitler and Mussolini, the Nazis and the fascists, do not like either communism or capitalism. They saw these as what? Thesis and antithesis. Therefore, they synthesized them together in a new position, a third position. You have to stop being a force of reaction, which is what the Nazis will call you, and get in line with the Nazis and fascists. You have to become a Nazi and fascist if you want to progress towards your end goal. For Mosley, fascism would re-spiritualize the thought of the people until the principles of religion return to their hearts, the militant service and mystical love. Blackshirt Olive Hawks recalled the desire to merge into the greater unit of nation or faith, which derived from fascism's spiritual instinct of self-sacrifice, which set them apart from people who drifted along. Fascism, Mosley preached, comes with the force of a new religion. It was infused with ritual as an alternative to Marxist faith. Its core was the idea of national rebirth, in which the individual would be fused with the mass to overcome oppositions between private and public, individual and collective. Again, a synthesis. It had the totalizing aim of a millenarian cult led by a charismatic leader whose dynamism was recharged in the liturgies of mass meeting, where irrational forces of the chosen and the symbolic took over from individualism and rationality.
The cult of personality coincided with the destruction of the bonds of society, using state-sponsored terror and massive economic disruption, while also creating an amorphous enemy class. Even as this was happening, all information channels were flooded with praise for the leader. Every success is directly related to him, every failure the result of saboteurs, wreckers, and those people. The cult of personality ties the leader to national pride. After Lenin's death, Stalin moved rapidly to position himself as successor. This came in two prongs. One, elevating Lenin to near sainthood, and two, tying himself to Lenin. Official propaganda over and over emphasized the infallibility of Stalin. The lionized public image, combined with Stalin only interacting with people outside of his ruling circle in carefully stage-managed events, built him up high and higher in people's estimation. Stalin, never the Machiavellian, also knew how to give the people concessions. Yezhov, Stalin's hatchet man and the murderer of so many thousands, was himself executed. His association with Stalin was erased, and he was even removed from photographs. And this was not an unusual action. Stalin's inner circle and high government officials were not spared from the climate of distrust and paranoia which Stalin cultivated. During the Second World War, Stalin cynically appealed not to the defense of communism or the party of Lenin and Stalin, but to the Rodina, the sacred motherland. Stalin used nationalism to motivate the people. His nationalistic outlook did not end after the war, however. In the case of Stalin, why his cult has continued to persist is partially due to the myth that was cultivated around him, and partially due to the trauma he inflicted. Victims often search for meaning in their experience, even though there is usually none.
Stalin, you are higher than the high celestial spaces, and only your thoughts are greater than you. Your spirit, Stalin, is brighter than the sun. We call him the small father of the people. All over the world, he stands for hope of a fairer society. He is the idol of hundreds of millions of people. In France, we also sing his praises.
With our whole hearts, we proclaim our ardent love for Stalin, and we assure him of our unwavering confidence.
He put in place the Gulag and enslaved 18 million people.
You have to cut off destructive party members to preserve it of disease and infection.
Stalin wanted a clean slate of the past. He passed a decree saying religion is against the interests of the people. Across the country, he removed the old Orthodox icons before destroying them. An ideal, a happy and healthy society, without any rich nor poor. A world where everything is shared, where everyone has equal chances at birth, where health and education are accessible to all. He wanted to modernize Russia in full swing, for her to become a paradise for workers, a world where unemployment does not exist, and where each worker can offer a decent life to his family. We thank you, Stalin, for happiness that you are providing to our country. His portrait is everywhere. In factories, on trains, in every classroom, and even in the dining rooms. He must be perfect because he reflects the success of communism.
Stalin loved nature expeditions. He would drive us there and we would sit next to a river. We would light a fire, grill meat while joking and singing.
For him, there is no such thing as failure. The system was faulty because their policy was being sabotaged. They don't have to describe the world as it is, but as it should be. The harvest is bad. We have radiant peasants filmed in magnificent fields. Industrial results are disappointing. We publish victorious press releases with fake numbers. We invent heroes like this famous miner, Alexei Stakhanov. During a competition, he broke down the productivity record by extracting 14 times more of coal than others. This story is completely false. In fact, these prisoners are turned into slaves.
Rehabilitation of man by man. We are at a moment in the history of mankind that looks like in the transition from ape to man.
Stalin gave back to the workers their pride.
Our country is surrounded by enemies who want to destroy our country and our people.
My ambition is to be the man who will break Marxism.
Glory to our country, to freedom, to independence. Onward to victory under Lenin's flag.
In the eyes of the world, he is the first to defeat Adolf Hitler. We welcomed Hitler's conqueror like a messiah. The soldiers were returning to their homes and getting ready to be reunited with their families. A teacher had a hard time imagining life without Stalin.
What will happen now? How are we going to live? What will happen to the country?
Our master and guide, the greatest genius of all mankind, has finished his glorious path.
Now let me remind you that these same individuals, these same dynasties, these same regimes, these same ideologies, often still existing nowadays, have caused millions of deaths on the record. Whether the number is exact or not is disputed. But regardless, there were dictators in these regimes. There's a lot of good coming from them. And perhaps this is why some people still, to this day, worship them or put them on a high status. There are many stories and many perspectives, which I'm not going to share here, but those were just some. And you cannot deny the good that these figures have done, otherwise nobody would have followed them. The promise to revise the economy, to stabilize, to protect against these people, the enemy, those who are trying to sabotage us, becoming the God or standing for God, standing for natural law, for nature, for truth, becoming the Messiah, having all this propaganda, being a man of action and theatrical, which is fake, but hey, it doesn't matter, right? Because it invokes an emotion, it invokes an investment in people. I am the savior. I'm the only one capable of restoring order. Let's overhaul the education system. Let's make sure we put in this ideology, because in the name of ideology, right, working alongside the people, look, I'm just like you, right? The isolation of ideas. We're the center of the world. We're the greatest nation on earth. You must passionately love your country. Well, you hear this in America, don't you? Right? And we got to compare ourselves to other countries, because Corey, you're living in America, right? And you have freedom of speech, so you must love it here, and you have to, really like your country because you have this ability and these other countries don't have it, right? So there's this nationalism, there's this his people, his nation, and we, this is a big term, right? This anti-religion, because this is the religion, and unfairly we are smeared by the media. And look, these are people just like you. Well, actually, they are just like you. You look at their upbringing and they're just like you. Maybe they had some trauma, some problems, some drug problems, but are they really that different from you? What makes these people turn into tyrannical rulers? Or maybe it's the millions and masses of people who follow them. As one of the documentaries mentioned, why aren't we looking at the masses? And then, oh, something happens. Oh, I didn't mean to cause that. I'm sorry. And it's understandable if you don't like me as your ruler. If you have some bitter words for me, that's okay. It just makes people worship more and say, oh, look, he's human. Oh, look, he's apologizing. He means well. He has good intentions. Look, he sounds like us. He looks like us. Our people are good. They can be reformed. See, they believe in the bad people. So why should we look at them as bad? Besides, they saved us from communism. They saved us from capitalism. The sovereignty of our homeland, protect people's lives and property. Meanwhile, they're not protecting people's lives and property, or they're taking out on others and they're hiding that from their own people. But we have to be selfless. We have to relieve the people. And this is the sole legal government, says Mao. Meanwhile, look at Taiwan, who fled. And they claim to be the real China instead. But it's for equality, it's for mutual benefit. Everyone's fair, everyone is happy and healthy. There's no rich, there's no poor, right? The Germans are being torn away. We had to endure. We don't want to be controlled by any foreign nation, just like you, right? You also want to have your own foreign nation, and you want to encourage the health of your people. So why can't we encourage the health of our people? Freedom and independence. Don't just drift along. You have to become devoted, because there's this enemy that you have to go after. And oh, I might create this problem, but oh, I'm here to save you. Stalin killing people all around him, well, we had to do it. I mean, they were sabotaging, and trust me, because I'm in control. So if you notice, there's a lot of utopia thinking here. There is a lot of purist thinking here. If we do this, society will be fixed. If you put me into office, if we pass this law, society will be fixed. And we have to reflect on oneself. We have to become aware and recognize the trauma that might be repeating through the generations, not just on behalf of these rulers, but on behalf of ourselves. Because a lot of people who go into the military may face a lot of trauma, but we don't always hear about that, do we? We do have to recognize our own agency, our own ability to think for ourselves, because if we ask ourselves, looking at that history, is that really human, and is it humane? I want you to look at this footage again of millions of people worshiping, crying, begging, pleading on their knees, doing chants and anthems for some people who they probably don't even know a whole lot about, except what they read in some book, which they probably wrote for propaganda purposes. And the people who do speak out, you probably don't hear of them, do you? But this won't be enough for somebody who still to this day worships Mao or Stalin or the North Korean leaders or whoever it is, because they have convinced themselves in their own mind that these people are indeed good for the nation, for the country, for the greater good. So even if Mark Passio puts out this gigantic seminar talking about how Nazism and communism are two masks of the same face, people are going to say, oh, well, I shouldn't look into it, even though there's like all this occult symbology and psychological manipulation going on behind the scenes, and some families and some foundations to our psychology that we ourselves are partaking in. No, I should not look at this because my leader can't do anything bad. If anything, he's the reason why I'm here. And he was actually right. That's why we have to go back to that. That's why he lost. You see, this is why a lot of people have this infatuation with Hitler, because these other leaders did not necessarily lose like Hitler did. And Hitler's ideology has become more taboo compared to the others. So in a way, it makes people far more attracted to it, not just the truths in it, because there certainly are truths within things that Hitler said, but you cannot deny that these things that he said are very similar to the things that these other dictators have said, and people are worshipping them just as much as the others. The worship looks practically the same. And remember what cults do. They always take what is good in order for a greater agenda of bad that they want you to be ignorant of so they can continue doing that bad. And they may sincerely think that what they're doing is also good. But just because they can do it does not mean it is true. Just because the pretense of what they're doing is true does not mean what they're going to do is true. Just because history has lies does not make it true. Just because they did good does not make it true. Just because people like them does not make it true. Just because you are desperate for change in the world right now does not mean that we should uphold an ideology, an identity, or a ruler over us. Most of the people who still worship these figures will probably not even continue to watch this video, and they probably won't even try to debunk it. They'll just attack it. But even if you worship these figures, can you deny the rest of this video? And so to break this down even further, let us look at the nature of the military across all these regimes, including the regimes to this day.
You think about how many military or veteran influencers in general are under or have been under some type of allegation of adultery, domestic violence, stolen valor, fraud, lying about stories. The list goes on and on. I know you guys can think of a ton of them off the top of your head. A lot of people can't understand how this could possibly be. It's just veterans tearing down other veterans. No. And I put myself in the thumbnail for a reason, because I'm not a hypocrite. You should not look at me as a role model. You should not idolize what I did for a job. And I'm gonna explain to you why. First thing I'm gonna tell you is the criteria of how a Special Forces soldier psychologically is looked for, okay? Every special operator, every single one, is on a sociopathic spectrum. And we look for it purposefully. A lot of people think that's crazy, but not really if you think about it. Why? What do you need a Green Beret or a Navy SEAL for? You need men who can go do morally reprehensible things to other human beings for a good cause that can then be brought back, decompartmentalize what they've done, and be reintegrated safely into society. That requires some level of sociopathic mental behavior. Now, what we don't want is when we get too far into the psychopathic realm, okay, and this becomes into complete psychopathy, narcissistic behavior, which some of that we've probably seen. Okay, so you need that balance. You need it in the spectrum, but not too high. And I tell you that for you to understand that because of that, men who are willing to go do the things I'm going to talk about in this video, you should not be shocked that these same men are willing to lie for monetary gain or lie for fame. That is nothing on the spectrum of mentally of what we're willing to do. Now, again, I said I would lead with me first, right? Because again, I'm not here to point fingers. This is not me attacking anybody personally, not veterans attacking veterans. It's for the American public, which hopefully this video gets out to a lot of people so they can understand this, can understand why this is so common in the military influencer world. Now, what was I asked to do, just like every other soft veteran? Go to a foreign country, kick in doors, eliminate threats, right? Obviously it gets way deeper strategically than that. And why? Now there's a lot of reasons that we can say why. There's the propaganda reasons over the last 20 years of fighting terrorism, if you still believe that. But really, what I did and what my teammates did is we went into someone else's country, into someone else's village, and we did absolutely horrific things to other human beings. Things that you guys cannot possibly imagine that happen in combat and war. Now, you can justify that as defending the nation, fighting terrorism. It does not change the fact that we do what we do, okay? And the reason why that's important is I tell you that to also tell you, having done those horrible things and killed people and taken human lives, which we'll talk about that a little bit later. The biggest issue when I talk about why we're not role models or on some moral high ground, I didn't feel bad about any of those things at the time. I didn't regret what I did at the time. I don't feel bad about them years later, and I don't feel bad about them now. I don't regret them. I don't lose a second of sleep over any of that. That is not the type of person that you should look at as a role model. And I'm not rare. When my ODA went out and took the fight to the enemy, the Taliban, and we killed 50 to 60 insurgents a night, nobody was coming back boo-boo faced and sad. It was high fives, celebrations. That's normal. That's the special operator room. That's the type of men that we're talking about. So if you think, again, that men who can do that without losing a second of sleep at night, what are they willing to do outside of that? Now, part of the problem is sort of the wool that gets pulled over people's eyes. Because a lot of us are very, very nice people. Most Green Berets are some of the nicest guys you're ever gonna meet. And this is where it gets confusing for people. Some of my teammates, some of my best friends in the world are amazing fathers, amazing men, amazing husbands, and they are absolutely horrible human beings. I would die for them in a second. But that's the reality of what we're talking about up here. Slaughtering other human beings, whether it's Taliban or whoever, is not a morally positive thing. It may be justifiable, it may be required, but does not make you a good person for doing it, okay? One of the worst things I see, and this is really because of Hollywood, sort of the glamorization, glorification of war and combat and killing. I'm not going to name names. You guys know who they are. But the influencers who are out there laughing and joking about how awesome it was for all the people they killed, I'll tell you this. I'm not going to judge you. The people who do that, there's only 2 reasons that they do that. No more than 2. The first, they're a psychopath and they thoroughly enjoyed ending human life. That's what serial killers do. There's a lot of that. That exists. The second is the more common one, and that is they use that humor as a coping mechanism to deal with what they've done. That is understandable, okay? So I don't judge that, but you guys should understand what's going on when you're watching a podcast with some Delta Force operator bragging about how he doesn't remember how many people he's slaughtered. It's not a good thing. That's not a role model. I have no issues. If you guys want to watch my channel because you think I'm entertaining, because you like the information I put out, right? The experience I have to give, all these sorts of different things. Fantastic. Glad to have you. Same thing for all the other soft channels. But if you're watching these people because you're idolizing them and looking up to them, you want your sons to be like them, that is incorrect. For any of them. Wrong, okay? The reason I tell you this is really good-hearted people that care about human beings do not join special forces, right? Because at the end of the day, if you really don't want to harm people, you really don't want to hurt people, you know by joining this organization, you're most likely, and your sole training focus is going to be to go do harm to other human beings. That's our job. That's like taking human life is what all of my time is training to become the best in the world at taking other people's lives. That's the job. Good-hearted people don't join that job. Now again, super nice people, amazing friends, fathers, husbands. But in here, there is the capability to do unseen harm to other human beings without thinking about it for a second, if called upon. It was like squashing a mosquito and moving on with my life. That's the reality of war. And I also tell you that because at the moment I didn't feel bad. When I walked up to them, I didn't feel bad. When I got home, I didn't feel bad. And today I don't feel bad. Yes, now part of that is because had we not killed them, they would have killed us. That's part of war. And I'll tell you this, one of the things I struggled with the most coming home from that combat deployment was not PTSD of, I just can't understand how trying to cope with what I did, and it was so bad. The biggest issue I had was not understanding why I didn't have any issues with the things that we did at all. That took a while for me to get over because that is not normal. Now, there's tons of people that are my friends, my students, my teammates that follow the channel, that watch the channel, that'll tell you Nate's super nice. Nate will bend over backwards to help you with anything you need, anything he can do, whenever he can do. That's true. I try to give back in every way I can. Charity events, speaking events to the kids. I try to be the best father, husband I can possibly be, but that does not make me a good human being. And I'll tell you this, I used to be very religious, okay? I am no longer religious. Not because I don't believe, not because I don't have faith, but because of the things that I went and did. And the fact that I regret none of them tells me I know what God thinks of that, and I know where I'm probably going. That's a reality. But you should for not a second romanticize, idolize, or make them your role. If you don't like this video and it upset you, that was kind of the point.
I saw this over and over again in the SEAL teams. You get a young kid that's coming through training and they go into a room and they're getting shot with simunition bullets, or there's someone yelling and screaming. We'd put Arabic women walking out of rooms. We'd have people get blown up with wounds. We would do this to them over and over again. So they realize, okay, I just gotta relax. I gotta detach from this situation so I can process what's happening and I can make a good decision, because no one is making a good decision when they're scared.
They're gonna get a mouthful about how I'm not in the cult anymore and I don't have to follow their appearance rules. I somehow missed this. I've read this book before, right? Like, I agree with literally every single thing that she writes in this book about cults, except, as I've said before, every cult scholar before me has given the military their cult exemption. I was a captain in the Army. I also wrote a best-selling book paralleling the Army to a cult. Like, I don't claim it. I don't give justifications. I just tell my story growing up in a cult. The Marine recruit clearly knows what the organization is that he or she is joining, what will be expected of him or her, and what will transpire are laid out clearly before joining. The United States Marine Corps program is set out and outlined from the start. This is just not true. I regularly say that it takes 6 months to onboard into either the Children of God cult or the United States Army. And during that time, not only do you have no idea what you signed up for, they are actively hiding it from you. One cult scholar called me on the carpet once to answer for calling the military a cult. And I said, I'm sorry, I'm going to go with my experience here. About a year later, he came back to me and he said, I just found out that recruiters are allowed to lie to you. I was livid. The first thing that the drill sergeants say to you when you get to Army basic training is, we don't care what your recruiter told you. Stomp, stomp, stomp. We don't care what your recruiter told you. You are ours now. When you were 17 years old and you signed your contract with the U.S. Army, did you get to negotiate? No. It's called I call it a black and white contract. And this is one of the culty things that everyone that joins the military goes through. You don't get to negotiate. I was actively lied to by every single human in that recruiting organization, from the captain who ran it down to my recruiter, who told me I could not get it if I commissioned. The only reason I knew that was a lie is because my horrible ex-husband, and that is not an opinion, you can Google his name, William Jeffrey Poole, had just done it. He had just gone in as an officer and gotten student loan repayment. And so they kept telling me I wasn't going to get it. If you're going as an officer, you're not going to get it. Send me to METS. Send me to Military Insurance Processing Facility. As soon as I got there, I was like, I want student loan repayment. And they're like, okay, put it in my contract. And I met 25 specialists who had college degrees while I was in the military. And they're like, no, ma'am, I had to do it. Otherwise I couldn't get student loan repayment. And I'm like, dude, I'm sorry to break your heart. I'm sorry that you got lied to and scammed, but you could have gotten both. On Army bases, we only play Fox News. If you are a Democrat, you best be in hiding. And every branch has a saying, if the military wanted you to have a spouse, they would have issued you one. They always bring up with me, you're free to leave anytime. Okay, like, are you really trying that with me? I was not under a service contract. I could get out anytime I wanted, except, oh, wait, no, I was deployed, so I couldn't. And oh, wait, no, I submitted my paperwork, but it got denied because I was sick. And then, oh, wait, no, when I finally could submit my paperwork, it takes 6 months to 1 year. And in that 6 months to 1 year, they are making you feel like absolute garbage trash, and they have millions of dollars to run retention programs on you. It was so much easier to get out of the Children of God than it was to get out of the United States military.
Fast forward 3 deployments, guys are in their rooms, drinking booze, waiting to get on that plane for their number to be up. It's a numbers game at a certain point. To, being drunk overseas, to just trying to either feel or forget, whatever it is, whatever your pleasure is of the day, trying to feel or forget. And then they come back and think, I don't need help, I'm good.
Soldiers' faces before and after war. Evgeny Kovatov. In World War II, he served as a Soviet soldier. Here he is in 1941, and this is how he appeared in 1945, 4 years later. He had suffered from shell shock from the war, as you can see, and had aged by nearly 20 years in just 4 years.
I experienced trauma and it's impacting me. And the more normal we make it for families to have those conversations, the easier it is for people to be able to be willing to get help, right? There's all sorts of data that shows that you can intervene and just sit down with someone and listen to them, and that can help people address trauma and address loss and address pain. There is a transition out of the military where there's a loss of a certain form of identity. And so if we don't keep talking about that, then we never really address it. I think sometimes we hold all of these feelings, and in particular, when you're in a military community, which can be small and insular, and then you go out into a different community, which is a different world, people may not know your experience. And so they may not even know how to approach you. But what everybody can do is ask, are you okay? Listen, genuinely care, and not be judgmental.
We're not a cult, we're the army. Shouldn't we be looking at that with extra care to make sure that the people that we are putting into place don't score too high on a narcissism scale? Okay, if you're a good cult, then what kind of aftercare are you giving your members when you need to ramp up the self-sacrifice and the exploitation of labor and the secrecy and all of these other things for the purpose of the mission? If somebody calls your organization a cult and your first reaction is to jump to its defense with all these reasons of why you're not a cult, you've just moved so much further up in my expert checklist of whether your group is cultic or not.
Us versus them, we're better. And so of course we can do these things because we're the good guys.
And this feeling of we're better than you, I think is really underlying why people will have one cultic experience after the next. So I went from being, a missionary kid. Obviously, we didn't call ourselves a cult. So in God's army, doing the work for God. And then I went into the U.S. Army, where we talk about we're 1% of the population and we're so much better than all those civilians that don't bother to want to serve their country. In Uncultured, the prologue, the book starts with me at basic training, and there's this event where you're going to hold this duffel bag over your head for 2 or 3 hours.
Wow.
And it's a very famous basic training thing. And I have this thought, I just joined a cult, right? And hearkening back to the last part of our conversation, I didn't necessarily see that as a bad thing. I thought that as, great, I'm going to be good at this.
Oh, wow.
I have the advantage over the rest of these little kids because I was born a soldier.
Yeah.
Right? So one of the big parallels that the group makes is to going from God's army to Uncle Sam's army, right? And we were militaristic, and we were, standing in lines and eating prison food and never being alone, right? The battle buddy system, all of that was normal and all of that was easy for me. The surprise comes in when I realized that the rape culture and the threat of sexual violence, including the fact that it happens to almost all of us, but we are never to speak about it, to be the much more scary parallel.
Yeah.
And basically the reason I wrote this book, it was right after a woman soldier named Vanessa Guillen was murdered, and the military didn't even bother to find her body for 60 days. And the 60 is important because if a rifle goes missing for 60 minutes, they will shut down an entire military base, and everybody from general to private will work until that rifle is found. So when this went out and then they finally looked for her body and found it in shallow graves, this was sort of an immediate signal to all women who've ever worn the uniform that you matter less than a rifle.
Oh, wow.
So we had this sort of our Me Too movement, and it was hashtag I am Vanessa Guillen, where we were really talking about this. And I just thought to myself, you know, somebody is going to have to bleed their soul onto a page and really shows what happens to the daughters of America when we disappear behind these high commune walls of the Department of Defense.
Yeah.
You are supposed to try to be a stone cold bitch. And all of the policies for women in the military force that, right? Like the policy banning people from having sex while deployed.
Right.
Which, like I say in the book, doesn't make sex taboo. It makes having a vagina taboo.
Right.
It just singles out women that are already only 5% of the population and puts us under so much extra scrutiny and makes it so much harder for us to do our jobs. So there's actually a chapter in the book called I'm the Bitch, right? Where I finally get congratulated on like my reputation in this unit. They call me the Ice Queen. They started calling me Queen Elsa as soon as, you know, Frozen came out. And I was this hardcore bitch that nobody was ever going to mess with. And so, first of all, I think, great, that means I can protect the women that work for me.
Right.
Right? Not true, because it ends up a woman that works for me. It's you need a lot of context, but there's a harassment investigation that gets out of control. And she, in her effort to get some help, starts lashing out against the whole unit. Basically, she wants to be moved. And the way for her to get moved is to claim that the unit is harassing her and building a toxic environment. And since I'm her boss, I'm the one that gets specifically blamed for that. But like I say, you know, it's like this is the natural outcome of telling women that you have to be a bitch in order to be respected. Okay, great. But now I got to go deploy for a year and I'm a bitch. So nobody wants to talk with me. Nobody wants to hang out with. The number one thing we tell soldiers for suicide prevention is talk to each other. But for women, if you try talking to a woman soldier while you're deployed, you're going to get pulled aside and told to stay away from her because it's bad for your career. So if you, a man, are talking to a woman, everyone is going to suspect that the two of you are sleeping together.
Wow.
And so this means women get no friend, right? So like, I really go into this on my first deployment where I'm a second lieutenant. I'm up at a high level headquarters. There's one other lieutenant and 3 other women captains. The captains won't speak to me because I'm too low ranking and won't be my friends. And so there's one woman that I can be friends with and we are on opposite ships. And nobody, it doesn't cross the mind of anybody that this leaves the women so isolated.
Yeah.
Right. And then not to mention back home, yes, you're going to get harassed in military culture, but on deployment, everybody thinks, much like in a cult, that everyone else is following the rules. So they think they're the only one paying attention to you and offering to have sex with you, you poor lonely girl. And they don't understand that like you are being propositioned in the dark corners by every single man you are deployed with, married or not. And it is just a constant year of harassment, a constant year of walking home every night, wondering if tonight's the night that somebody is going to assault you. And when you try to bring it up, you get told, okay, Daniela, you have a weapon. And I love to break this down for people because it makes them very, very uncomfortable. So your answer to me living in a constant threat of rape from my own colleagues, brothers in arms who are supposed to have my back, your answer is not that you're going to fix the culture. It's not that you're going to take care of the rapists. It's that I should have to choose between being violated or the trauma of shooting a colleague dead.
Yeah.
Oh, and that's not to mention that you're not going to believe me and probably put me in jail anyways, right? When I would try to have these conversations with the leaders and say, we need to be doing more, right? We need to be giving the women soldiers rides home at night. I would literally get told, Daniela, you need to watch out because it sounds like you're blaming the victim. That's what like, these men would say to me. Like, if you are saying we need to help them protect themselves, you're kind of implying that you think it's their fault. Okay, so adultery is illegal in the military, and also the military has huge rates of cheating. And they will use it to tack on when they want to get rid of you for some other reason. They will care about adultery. Or if you're a woman deployed, they will care about adultery. And the U.S. Army is supposed to, when two soldiers do something fraternizing that is against the rules, the person who is higher ranking is always supposed to get in more trouble because they are supposed to be the responsible ones. But that is almost always reversed when it's women. Almost always the woman gets the worst charge and the worst punishment. And of course, the stereotype conversation becomes all these women temptresses, you know, very Adam and Eve like story. Oh, well, soldiers will sacrifice themselves for a woman. So first of all, soldiers will sacrifice themselves for each other. That is what we are trained to do. Second of all, we have not only found that that is learned behavior that can be unlearned, but we've found out that almost every culture in the world, men hesitate before killing women. So now they actively recruit women for special forces teams. They want you to have long hair and look like a woman from far away because they're starting to understand, or like the guy says to me in the book, that like we want women spies because there's a reason it's James Bond and a James Bond woman. The whole story that you are getting in Uncultured is me just experiencing trauma and just shutting it down and just saying like, I'm not going to live with this. I can't deal with this right now, right? I'll think about this tomorrow, right? Like I'll deal with this later. And the truth is, as we find out, you know, like you cannot live your whole life just going through trauma after trauma after trauma after trauma and never confronting. I was dealing with complex trauma my whole time and just shutting it down because I had to be perfect and had to be perfect. And, you know, I have a whole group now of cult babies that I say we did everything right and now we're all falling apart in our 30s and 40s. I'm not going to get to go back and have a childhood, but I can understand that what I lost in the first 6 years of my life by being in a cult was what you're doing for the first 6 years of your life is developing your personal identity. So I can go do that as an adult. I can realize that I still need to do that. You know, you're healing from trauma when peace and tranquility doesn't sound like boredom. So many of us that were harmed in coercive groups, one of the reasons why they're able to harm you and coerce you for so long is because they never let you be idle, right? And part of what we are doing with that perfectionism when we come out of those groups is we are continuing to never let ourselves be idle.
Imagine living around 100 people continuously in a high-stress situation where you are surrounded by fear, unknown, darkness, and there are people out there who desperately want to kill you. And imagine all of a sudden a shot rings out or an explosion takes place, and friends of yours are now on the ground screaming, a leg is gone or they're shot. A helicopter comes and takes them away, and you never know what happened to them. You had no way to find out if they lived or died, where they were from, or anything. Years later, as you thought back on the war, as you relived that particular incident when your friend was wounded, you were frustrated because you never were able to find out what happened to him. This person literally disappeared in your life.
You guys hear any whining? Get your hand off of your mask! Why are you quitting the exercise? Here! Feet out 6 inches, hands off of the mask! Why are you quitting the exercise? Do not throw up on my pool deck! Don't lean your head back, it gets worse! No big deal! It hurts! It sucks! Embrace the suck and get comfortable being uncomfortable! Are there any questions? No, sir. I cannot see you. You guys think you could handle this drill? Yes, sir. Don't think I forgot about you. Remove the stickers from your new dive mask. Keep water in your dive mask. Stop whimpering. Keep your hands on your rifle. Why are you quitting the exercise?
This is the hardest military training in the world. In fact, these soldiers have to carry this huge log several hundreds times on this extremely hot desert, pushing their bodies to the absolute limit. Then they must repeatedly submerge their heads in water for hours, and all of that while having nothing to eat or drink. They are then moved to freezing conditions, where they can only eat snow and raw onions to keep them from getting sick. Could you survive this?
I am in the army, and running's what we do. We wake up in the early morning 'cause they tell us to. And if you do not wake up, it probably will get bad. You might get an Article 15 and labeled shitbag.
I was ready to end my own life. So the day I decided to do it, one of the other guys in the fire academy with me asked me if I was okay, and then I broke down crying. I'm like, dude, I'm not okay. I went and talked to another one of the fire cadre. He was actually a former 82nd Airborne. It was like all the emotion I'd held in for the past 8 years just came out in that one instance. I'd never cried so much in my life. That firefighter ended up taking me to the Long Beach VA, and I checked myself in. They take everything away from you. They put you in a gown, and they take you and put you in the back of a cop car to escort you to the mental health facility. No wonder that military members don't want to go for help, because it's not very welcoming. You can't shower alone. You have to have someone watching you. First thing they give you when you go in there is just anxiety medicines. It makes you like a zombie. It's very regimented of what you can and can't do while you're in there, kind of like jail. I have to request to get phone numbers off my phone. It's very strict with visitors. I decided to resign from the fire department, mainly out of shame and guilt.
By definition, you are going to have a cultic experience. And I think what's left is for us to figure out like what that tells us and just how cultic the experience needs to be.
The spiritual aspect of a soldier is just as important, if not more important, than the physical and mental aspects, because it's that part of resiliency that we need to continue to maintain. We'll have Bible studies. We'll be doing walking around, just talking to soldiers, providing counseling.
The Army is creating new occupational specialties or career fields having to do with artificial intelligence.
Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. No excuse, ma'am. Ma'am, may make a statement. Ma'am, may ask a question. Ma'am, I do not understand. Ma'am, I do not know. Go ahead and try that again.
And conscription, where you have no choice but to serve in the army, is required in many parts of the world, by the way. And these military or even police problems can happen in every regime. Notice that the effects are mostly inward, not just outward, and it's less easy to see. You have this purposeful pressure being put on people that need to toughen them up, do this over and over and over to them. But it teaches bravery, right? And all the trauma, well, sacrifice is necessary, right? It's okay, we can use God to help us cope, to help strengthen our mind and our resiliency. To do more war? You think God would like the fact that you're actually using His word or His teachings to hurt your fellow man? And don't worry, we can use AI to help the army. How do you think that will go? More powerful machines, not even needing humans suppressing a conscience, just using machines that have no conscience at all. What if you're just being used for political agendas? What if you're just being convinced to attack your fellow man, people who you barely know, people who are trying to live their lives just like you are? We did everything right, she said, and now everything's falling apart. Indeed, perfectionism as such is not necessarily human. She says that we have to develop our own personal identity. Do we really know who that is? Especially someone like her who grew up in a notorious cult. She said it made her much more likely to fall into another cult. She never knew her own identity until she took the time away from both of these cults to actually see, wait, I am in a cult, and wait, I do have a self-identity. Let me find it. Let me see it. Check out this comment. War is worse than hell because in hell there are no innocents. I don't see any creepy faces. He's referring to the faces that changed like 20 years of time within 4 years. This person says, all I could see are real heroes sacrificing their whole lives and fighting for their country and their people. Nothing but respect. But they kind of forget and ignore the dehumanizing aspect of this. and the trauma and what this person has to deal with after this time, and if that war was even necessary to begin with. The sacrifice is not always a good thing. Fighting for their country, why not fight for the truth and for the world? And is not the world their people? I'm confused here. Do people want to divide each other? Do people want to fight each other? Here's another quote. Monsters aren't born, they're made in silence, in pain, and discipline. Every rep you do, every drop of sweat, every time you choose power over comfort, you're becoming that legend no one can ignore. Is it equating monsters to being legends? As if you have to become full of strength and discipline to become legendary? But does that mean of your own psyche, of your own self, of the truth? Or again, because of some conscription and because of some marching orders and you were just really good at being obedient? I mean, there's videos like this on the internet, surviving a week in Air Force Special Operations. I survived military's most brutal obstacle course. Why do they have to survive these events? Why is it that the industry, which is supposed to help us feel stronger and safer, is making us feel less safe? Just like how when we talk about medicine, it's actually causing disease. Are we fighting other people or are we fighting our own people? And if we're fighting people overseas, what about the wars that we have right here in our own land with our own minds and our own politicians? From the Health Revealed project, the biggest project on the psychology of authoritarianism, you can see Augustin Hammond from Social Psychology mentioning that rigorous physical training, drills, and rituals reinforce discipline and absolute conformity. Soldiers are indoctrinated with a set of beliefs that prioritize loyalty to the military and the nation, often through propaganda and controlled information. And this type of mindset takes place even after leaving the military. The military often dehumanizes both its own soldiers and the enemy, viewing them as tools or targets rather than individuals. It's like that famous quote from Stalin saying, "One death is a tragedy and a million is a statistic." Augustine goes on to say, war often leads to increased authoritarianism within society as governments expand their powers under the guise of national security. Again, the benefits are used as a ploy. Prolonged exposure to violence can desensitize soldiers, making them less empathetic and more prone to aggressive behavior. And by the way, did I mention that you'll have a bunch of benefits if you fight in the military? You'll be set for life. But Hammond says this desensitization that happens in the military can affect their interactions with civilians and family members. Oh, but you don't see that, do you, until you're actually out of it. He continues and says militarism can become ingrained in cultural norms and values, perpetuating a cycle of violence. This includes the glorification of military heroes, the normalization of military presence in everyday life, and the acceptance of war as a necessary evil. Professor van der Kolk talks about trauma and says that we have rebounded from relentless wars, countless disasters, both natural and man-made, and the violence and betrayal in our own lives, but these traumatic experiences do leave traces. We're finding out this is a widespread phenomenon which is causing potentially a lot of disease. Gabor Mate is a doctor in this field of study as well, and he says that cultural trauma such as colonization, war, discrimination, or socioeconomic inequalities can permeate generations, shaping the collective psyche. And there's videos online like The Unseen Army, Psychiatric Trauma and American Veterans of the Great War, and notice what it says at the bottom of this description. This talk aims to recover their voices and to show their continuous struggles to be heard within a post-war American society that was all too ready to move on from the war. Oh, it happened. We had to do what we had to do. Now we just move on, continue our lives as if it never happened. Good luck saying that to the families who actually were oppressed. You'll also find many videos online of people hugging and rejoicing that, oh my gosh, my father, my husband, my wife, or what have you came back from the military. Look how happy they are. Look how amazed they are to see their family. And they fought so hard, and they have their own day, and they're a celebrity because without them, we wouldn't have this country. Now, some people take the downsides to going in the military as a joke, potentially, or without much compassion, and they say something like this, LOL, what you get for being a mercenary for the government. Now, although this is said the way it is said, can you say he is wrong? Now look at the comments. Considering both these mercenaries are both now successful guys, one a writer, now the other a comedian, helping hundreds of thousands more people than either of us will, I think they did fine. Well, you don't necessarily know their impacts, do you? Or their personal life. You're laughing at these men? No, you're actually laughing at all the veterans who were injured or paid the ultimate price. Very disrespectful. You should also learn the difference between mercenaries and soldiers. Blood doesn't know what a draft is. So as you can see, there's a contested comment section here, but I think they each have perspectives worth learning from. But if we remember what was said about trauma, we have to have compassion, we have to have conversation regarding this topic, because it can be touchy considering the fact people have invested their lives into it. I remember even talking to people on the streets, as I sometimes do, and I asked a veteran, would you suppress your conscience or would you obey the law? And he broke down in tears to me because he knew that he suppressed his conscience when he fought in war. Now, the woman that you saw in the clips, her name was Daniela Young, and she also wrote several books, including one called The Culting of America. So she is somebody who is now taking to the front lines the issue of cults and looking at multiple different facets of our society, even breaking down what she believes to be the core characteristics. Here's a list of 10 different things that she particularly highlights: the charismatic leader, a sacred assumption, and I want you to look down this list and see if there's any parallels with what we've talked about so far and as we continue this video. She also shares, in contrast to that, the 10 commandments for good groups that aren't cults, which I think is worth reading as well, so you can understand, well, am I not in a cult? But now that we have covered the military, let us talk about the police.
People say, there's only a few bad cops. It's just a few bad apples. Well, when the bad apple is at the top of the food chain, your option is either to do what the bad apple says, go along with the bad apple and be a bad apple, or lose your job. And that is the situation that Sarita police officers are in every single day.
One of the cops said to another cop, well, we finally got to use the new battering ram. Apparently they bought a new battering ram that they had to use. Well, here we go. So I had a door available for them, apparently.
They cut me. I was all cut from the door. I was bleeding, because if you hit hard enough, I'll bleed easy.
Took me down, cuffed me immediately.
And my nose was hurting.
Finally, at the end, he says, whoa, we have exigent circumstances and this and that. We had to make sure that you weren't being held hostage. And I'm just like,
And they kept saying, does he hurt you? And I said to the cops, you're the only ones that hurt me today. They were the only ones that hurt me. I couldn't get through to them. They would not listen to me at all.
Scouring for some evidence of some crime. If they can do it to me, they can do it to you, and they will.
I want you out of the bedroom.
We'll be out of your bedroom in 1 minute.
I want you out of my house.
We'll be out of the house in a moment as
I
well.
want to go to bed. I have to get up early tomorrow. It's very embarrassing. We have a good marriage. And I just feel so embarrassed at the whole town. I mean, I was scared to even go to Safeway because I thought they know me. I thought they were going to question me, but they didn't. Thank God. They were all nice to me.
When James Freeman arrived to document the proceedings, Town Attorney Jim Jellison personally blocked him from stepping inside the conference room, despite having already agreed to allow video recording. They wouldn't even let him through the door to set up his equipment before leaving. It was a move that felt less like logistics and more like an intentional wall to keep the public from seeing what was about to happen behind closed doors.
Or what? Step out of the way. Chief, no. Chief, what the hell are you doing? Are you kidding me? Chief, are you kidding me?
I'm not holding anybody.
This is your fault.
I'm not holding anybody.
This is your fault, counselor.
Why are you doing this?
Stop!
Ready? I'm in a public area. Can you guys just back up? Guys,
I'm documenting the beating.
No one, stop! Hey, call my wife.
Who is a witness to the attack? We got a couple people who are witness to the attack. Were you guys witnesses? Let's get all your names and numbers before you leave.
You have our names and stuff.
Your name and number again? Now, Rivera.
You have
is that your name?
Yeah.
What's your number? SB282. What's your name and number?
Officer Lewis, SB359.
Did you see what happened?
I did not.
Your eyes were shut? Was your body cam rolling?
I just barely got.
Was your body cam rolling? Whose body cam was rolling? Raise your hand. Conveniently no one's, right?
You have a case number?
Okay.
And then you can show her, and then we'll get out of here.
What's your name and number?
She's from
Sergeant Siebold, SP255.
Did you see what happened? Are you a witness?
I did not.
Is your body cam running?
I do not have body on camera with me.
Convenient.
Minutes ago, the Sahuarita town manager released a statement on the alleged assault saying, quote, I have tremendous confidence in the Sahuarita Police Department and the men and women who work hard every day to keep this community safe.
Is this a cameraman assaulting someone, or is it a cameraman being assaulted?
Any type of law enforcement or military is basically you're a paid mercenary. They work for the cult of order givers.
and they are the order followers, and it's all one satanic cult. It's never made more clear than when you're working in this line of work and you're at this internal, you got this like strife going on within yourself. If you have a conscience, you there's a lot of contradictions in it, and there's a lot of people who got into it for what they consider to be the right reasons to protect and serve, but then they find out that they're not really protecting and serving shit, but what these immoral politicians want you to. After I made this lady cry, I'm like, fuck that, I'm not doing this no more. So, and I got in trouble for it, and I've been speaking out openly for a couple years, but especially the last year about all this, and I'm losing money because of it. So they're fucking with me still, and I don't give a shit. They will use excessive force in order to, and then they will stand down and do absolutely nothing, which is still an action. Doing nothing is an action when they're told to. Everyone's fighting and backstabbing each other to try to get promoted because order following is not a natural state. The 5-year-old in every single one of us wants to say, you're not the boss of me. So every cop does not want to be, they want to become a higher level order follower and get promoted. So the amount of backstab, I'm not saying there isn't some type of camaraderie in some little cliques in some places, but I think we all start to, as human beings, assimilate our environment. Which is like when I worked in a prison, I had to be very careful because there are very evil people in the prison. But there were some very nice people in the prison that shouldn't have been in there.
And of course, we're not even going over the jailing systems or the court systems. I mean, you can do this almost all day, but there is corruption on all levels of our society. And there are plenty of channels like Lackluster, Here's the Deal, James Freeman, who have been documenting this extensively, showing day by day the amount of cops in America, again, this free country of the world who secures rights and is limited government mindset, that seems to be doing quite the opposite of what we're told. I want you to ask yourself the question again. Those individuals that you see, those ones who say, oh, my camera wasn't rolling, oh, I didn't see it, oh, I'm not going to answer any questions, and don't answer his questions. Are they really human? Are they really thinking for themselves? Take a look at this slide talking about the psychology of police. You have order followers, psychopaths, bootlickers, and cowards. This might offend some people, but I want you to take a look at it. From David Grossman talking about combat psychology, he talks about his findings by the Police Foundation called group absolution. When people are acting as a group, even a group of two, there is a diffusion of responsibility. And from combat psychologist Ben Shallot, he says if aggression exists, it will become more so as a result of crowding. The effect of the crowd seems to be much like a mirror, reflecting each individual's behavior and those around him, and thus intensifying the existing pattern of behavior, thus increasing the dehumanization that transfers men into beasts. The more members in the group, the more psychologically bonded the group, and the more the group is in close proximity, the more powerful the enabling can be. And enabling in this sense is referring to immoral behavior that goes legitimized and allowed into society. But we're told that these law enforcement are here to prevent and stop crime, because without them there would be criminals that would get away with all sorts of crimes. But they're getting away with crimes. I remember James Freeman even doing a video about how there was police training near a playground and a stray bullet went to the playground. And then the police department just gave an apology. But if any citizen did that, what would happen to them? It's like the common saying, if a citizen makes a mistake, it's a crime. And if a politician or order follower does a crime, it's a mistake. You probably never heard of a man named Gustave D. Molinari, but he has a quote that says, anarchy is no guarantee that some people won't kill, injure, kidnap, defraud, or steal from others, but that government is a guarantee that some will. In fact, he wrote a whole book on how private police would work, or a police system that is decentralized, not centralized, how that would work. You probably never heard of that perspective, and you're probably not likely to hear this perspective.
Christian, Jewish, Muslim, atheist, agnostic, whatever. The real religion of the vast majority of people in this country and the world is the worship of government. It's the God they bow to, it's the God they pray for blessings, and it's the God they obey.
Quite simply, a statist is somebody who believes in having a state. Basically, anybody who wants government. Government is the exercise of authority over a people or place, and that is basically the right to rule. It's not just the ability to control other people, because most people have that in one way or another. It's the right. It's the idea that certain people it's legitimate for them to forcibly control others. Belief in government is a purely faith-based, indoctrinated belief. It doesn't actually make any sense in practical terms or in evidence or in logic. For years, I thought it was a really good analogy to compare government to religion, and only a few years ago did I realize it's not an analogy. It is a religion in every way. It has a superhuman deity, government, that has rights that mortals don't. It isn't restricted by the rules that apply to mortals. It issues commands, and if you disobey, you're a sinner and you deserve to be punished. The faithful, the true believers, they have great faith in these bizarre rituals, elections and legislation and appointments, and they dress up and then they say, ta-da, now I represent government. I know I just look like a person, but I don't just have the rights of a person because I represent the magical deity called government. And so I'm allowed to demand your money and boss you around and hurt you if you disobey me. I'm acting on behalf of government, and it has commandments called laws. And these laws aren't just the threats of humans. They are decrees from something superhuman. And so all you good people out there should bow to this deity. And if you want the world fixed, this is what you pray to. And we give you certain rituals of how to pray to it and when you're supposed to pray to it, and pray to the God to make the world what you wish it was and to save you from all the uncertainties of reality. The doctrine people are taught is just patently absurd. And a bunch of examples of that are like consent of the governed. There isn't such thing. If it's consent, it's voluntary. If it's being governed, it's not. The actual given excuse is, we have the right to rule you because you decided we did, even if you didn't vote for us, and even if you oppose everything we do to you. And, well, they represent us. Okay, they represent us by doing a lot of things that we don't have the right to do. And they represent us by bossing us around and taking our money. Like, I bet if I went to my neighbor and bossed him around and took his money and said, I'm representing you, he would say, what? What a stupid thing to say. To me, the most insane is, we are the government, which you hear everywhere. And I ask somebody, wait, do you really not notice that there's a group of people over there, they issue threats, and they call them laws, and they issue demands for money, and they call it taxes. And if you disobey, they send men with guns to hurt you. Now, are you really incapable of distinguishing between yourself and them? One of the biggest giveaways that the belief in government is a complete blind faith religious belief is the way people respond. One very easy line of questioning is, can you give somebody else a right that you don't have? And everybody says, well, no, of course not. Well, how about you and your buddy? Can the two of you give someone else a right that neither of you had? Well, no. And it only takes a couple more questions to get to, well, how did Congress get rights that you don't have? They get emotional and they get angry, or they get defensive, or they run away. They didn't come to this belief through reasoning and evidence and logic. They came there by having a blind faith belief smashed into their heads, starting before they could even talk. It's just something they were taught to believe, that there's this thing called authority, and that it's allowed to do things that human beings aren't, and that people have an obligation to obey it, to the point where, yeah, it's some people, they weren't gods or anything, some people wrote down a thing on paper, and then they called it legislation, and they did certain rituals, and then people go around saying, well, this is law. Most people literally feel physical discomfort and fear at the thought of disobeying anyone in authority. Most people can't say, no, I'm not going to do that, because it goes against their years and years of programming and indoctrination that trains them to think, if you do as you're told, you're good. If you don't, you're bad. And that's the message of school, and that message gets pounded in people's heads. Students are taught over and over and over and over again, every stinking day they're in school, that the measure of your virtue is how well you obey authority. The whole approval-disapproval thing. The one thing you learn in school is, if you do as you're told, you get approval and reward. And if you don't do as you're told, you get disdain and condemnation. They'll make sure everybody knows you're a bad person because you didn't do as you were told. The belief in authority leads everybody, good people, bad people, everything in between, to advocate and do things they wouldn't otherwise do, bad things they wouldn't otherwise do, including cops, because the cops really and truly believe that they have the right to do things that I don't have the right to do and you don't have the right to do. The only reason most of them do what they do is because they believe in authority, and they really believe that legislation gives them an exemption from morality. So that when they do something and someone says, hey, what you're doing is bad, hey, I don't make the law, I just enforce it. I'm not responsible for my actions, I'm just a tool of some weird thing somewhere else called government. You can't blame me for what I am personally doing because I'm not really doing it. As loony as that is, that's what most of them will say whenever somebody says, hey, what you're doing is wrong. It's not okay to, it's not okay to lock people up for smoking marijuana. It's not okay, all the ways in which quote unquote law enforcement initiates violence against nonviolent people. And if you bring that up to them, they literally talk as if they didn't do it. The only reason they do that is because they were taught the lie of authority and government and law along with everyone else, and then they were told, you're just a tool of the thing called law, and that makes it so you have rights that other people don't have. So you don't have to feel bad about physically assaulting nonviolent people because the law says it's okay. It really is just permission to ignore your conscience by saying you have rights that other people don't. You don't have the right to tell other people what habit to have on your own. You don't have the right to go and extort people on your own. But once you're law enforcement, then not only is it okay, it's noble and great to go around robbing people and bossing them around. That is the biggest danger of the belief in authority. It tricks good people into condoning or doing really nasty, horrible, violent things because they think, well, this is okay if government and authority does it.
They are raised by their parents, by the school, by the government, by the culture, by all the authoritarian messages built into everything to think that obedience is a virtue. And when you raise the culture to think that, and you get one nasty psycho at the top who says, hey, go do bad stuff, people say, well, I have to follow orders. I have to obey the law. I have to do as I'm told because that's a virtue. And then good people march off and do evil stuff. I'm not scared of the Maos and the Stalins and the Hitlers. I'm scared of the thousands or millions of people that hallucinate them to be authority and so do their bidding and pay for their empires and carry out their orders. I don't care if there's one loony with a stupid mustache. He is not a threat if the people do not believe in authority. Some people assume that, well, you must trust everybody if you don't want government. That's not at all true. I don't nearly trust everybody, but if I don't trust people to run their own lives, why on earth would I trust them to be in a position of power where they can forcibly run other people's lives?
Really what it boils down to is saying, I don't trust people. People are untrustworthy and unpredictable. So my solution is to take some of those people, some of the most untrustworthy around, give them permission to violently control us all. And that will protect us from the untrustworthiness of mankind. Okay, you're so scared of the average man out there and so thankful for government. Let me ask you, who has taken more of your money under threat of force? Private people threatening you or agents of authority threatening you? How many murders are committed by private people compared to how many are committed by people acting on behalf of authority? It's not even close. The number of murders committed in the name of law enforcement and government and authority completely dwarfs private murder. Even governments killing the people of other countries is small compared to them killing their own people. In the last 100 years, over 270 million human beings killed by their own governments, not counting war.
Any kind of action that sort of relieves people's distress a little bit without changing the system maintains the system. In fact, that is the way the American system, which is very exploitative and very unfair, that's the way the American system has been maintained for all these centuries, really, by giving people a little bit and giving enough people, just enough, to prevent them from breaking out in open rebellion.
The America that the super patriots claim to love is neither a geographical totality, nor is it a vast population, nor is it really a history or culture. As far as I can see, their America, and they say love America, is an ideological abstraction. It's an emotive symbol that can be embodied in other abstract symbols like the flag. People who know who they are don't worry about being number one. People who are in touch with the deeper values of social justice and democracy don't get a number one thrill from stomping on a tiny nation. People who seek friendship and cooperation with other peoples don't need to lord it over other nations and outshine them. Such a people don't have to find reassurances in themselves by looking at or imagining the deficiencies of others. And they don't feel threatened by the accomplishments and strengths of other people. They don't panic when they fail to win the most gold medals or most medals at the Olympics.
These are killer devices designed by man to kill men, women, children, the elderly, to destroy homes and memories and dreams and livelihoods and neighborhoods, to destroy. What we do, which is more frightening than coming up with these weapons, is it really no big deal? It's the ability to morally justify what we do, to pay homage, to pay tribute to people who have devoted their lives to killing people.
The income tax goes to the general fund of the United States federal government, which means that it goes to a lot of things that are quite controversial. For instance, a lot of that money goes to military spending. To make people feel good about the taxes that they pay, you really need two things. You need a sense of community, that there's an us, and you need a sense of representation, right? That government represents that us.
We are the best, which makes us the most dangerous. Conscience, morality, executive thinking, but also judgment, frontal lobe, prefrontal right here. And those people who do not have the ability to access that, those people we call psychopaths, people whose head and heart are disconnected. So some people are either born that way, maybe they're psychopaths, or they're sociopaths and are conditioned to that. Or we can just cut to the chase by using our ability to create situations through morality, religion, training, patriotism, frame of reference, moral relativism, situational ethics, philosophy, theology, indoctrination, mob and herd mentality in psychology, like Le Bon and Kierkegaard and Nietzsche and Bernays and everybody.
You know, a question could be raised. What's so important about the state existing and growing and continuing and expanding and flourishing, whatever else? That's taken as self-justifying. In fact, that question would be considered unpatriotic.
So I hope you allow yourself to entertain this thought, because that's how we refine our thinking and actually discipline our minds. So while we might want to talk about disciplining ourselves with strength when it comes to the military, disciplining our mind here with philosophy and challenging ideas that we may totally disagree with is a great way to strengthen our minds. I'm not trying to put you through some trauma. I'm not trying to scar your life with this information. If anything, this helps you see more of who you are. And I'm not saying this as a cult tactic either, because these systems will claim to do that for you by proposing their ideologies. Am I really pushing an ideology when I'm just asking you to question everything, including me, including all the political ideologies? Here you have a chart showing the religion of statism, that is the belief in government or authority. And as you can see, there are symbols and texts and everything as you see in a traditional religion. Even Dr. Carl Jung, a famous psychologist, talks about how the state has taken the place of God. He says free opinion is stifled and moral decision ruthlessly suppressed on the plea that the end justifies the means, even the vilest. The policy of the state is exalted to a creed. The leader or party boss becomes a demigod beyond good and evil, and his votaries are honored as heroes, martyrs, apostles, and missionaries. Only the party boss who holds the political power in his hands can interpret the state doctrine authentically. And you can see when he says state doctrine is simply another word for statism. Now, what's relevant here is understanding that one of the top causes of unnatural death overall in our world is known as democide, which is the murder of any person or people by a government, including genocide, politicide, and mass murder. Professor R.J. Rummel, University of Hawaii, estimated around 262 million deaths in the 20th century for a total of 395 million if you add the 133 million deaths pre-20th century, and this does not include many other statistics that he did not account for. Now, the man who was explaining statism goes by the name Larkin Rose, and he calls statism the most dangerous superstition. Now, statism is also correlated with following orders. And he says, to be blunt, the belief in authority serves as a mental crutch for people seeking to escape the responsibility involved with being a thinking human being. It is an attempt to pass off the responsibility for decision-making to someone else, those claiming to have authority. But the attempt to avoid responsibility by just following orders is silly, because it requires the person to choose to do what he is told. Even what appears as blind obedience is still the result of the individual choosing to be obedient. Not choosing anything is not possible, right? We are not machines, but we might liken ourselves to one. We might liken ourselves to some identity that we are not, but we are not. And he says, it should be self-evident that if thousands of basically good people were all seeing the world as it is, they would not be desperately trying to kill each other. In most cases, the problem is not actual evil or malice, but simply an inability to see things as they are. For anyone who grows up in any cult, they have a warped perception of reality. They've been trained into that perception, and they don't think they're in a cult. They don't think that they're doing evil. They don't think that there is any evil going on. They'll justify any evil, supposedly, as something that is just a mistake or something that happened that could be apologized for, but they never challenge their underlying belief or identity. And if you're very averse to a lot of what is being shared here, I challenge you to answer the 5 questions on the screen. These 5 questions will help you ask yourself, am I a statist, essentially? Am I someone who partakes in statist interaction or upholding a statist form of morality? Now, you might not know about the Stanley Milgram experiment, but this was done in the 1960s to study obedience to authority figures. Participants were instructed to administer electric shocks to another person who was actually a Confederate when they answered questions incorrectly. The shocks increased in intensity with each wrong answer, and the Confederate eventually began to scream and beg for the experiment to stop. Despite this, many participants continued to administer the shocks when instructed to do so by the experimenter. The experiment has been replicated in many countries many times with an estimated 80 to sometimes 90% obedience rate. So this is average people willing to harm their fellow man simply because they're told to do so by an authority figure. And another controversial experiment was the Stanford Prison Experiment, which shows the psychological effects of power and authority. Zimbardo also has works on this subject, and this experiment was terminated only after 6 days. But there were average people, again, who were taking the role of guard, and they quickly became abusive, and the prisoners began to show signs of extreme stress and psychological distress. After this experiment, many of the guards said, how could I have ever done that? I never thought I would have done that in the world. It's the same thing with the Stanley Milgram experiment. People were laughing nervously, they were crying, they were like, how could I have ever done that? And, oh, you know, this was all just set up, like, thank goodness that wasn't real, but I'm shocked at myself for having done that. Here's another good scenario on the screen. If John told you that you had to obey him or he would violate you, that would be wrong. Even if John claims that because he and his friends are in the majority, you must obey or be punished, that would still be wrong. Even if John and his friends vote to have an institution work on their behalf and that you must obey its dictates or be punished, that would still be wrong. And the reason why is because the same action is being committed despite different people or more people or some ideology doing it. Here's more statistics on democide showing also religion, but it's important to note that religions can use state power for control. And the state can also use religion for control. It can go both ways. But can these religions be practiced peacefully? Can they be practiced without violence? And what happens when they do use violence? What is required? You might see statism as the religion to assist other religions in trying to dominate other religions. Here's another picture. Statism is the utopian ideal that just the right amount of violence used by just the right people in just the right way can perfect society. Sounds quite utopian to me. This is what it looks like when troops are obeying orders and when citizens are obeying gun laws. That doesn't look like safety to me, that looks like chaos. But yet we're told to fear freedom because we need safety. And what happens is that people say, well, there's a problem here, there's a problem there, well, the government should solve it. You know, if there's murder hornets or a robot uprising or some pandemic or people simply disagreeing with you, it's in the government's hands to fix it, because otherwise, who will? Here's another graphic, statism illustrated. Do you have spare change? Sure, as he reaches into another person's pocket. You could also see that there are euphemisms or different terms created to change the actual action, or say the perception of that action, since the action is the same. The Patriot Act can be felony wiretapping. Enhanced interrogation is simply torture. Taxation is just armed robbery. Arrest is kidnapping. And you go down the list and you start to see, well, this is quite interesting. Some of the biggest crimes that have ever happened are committed by people who were just following orders. Governments are owned by corporations, run by psychopaths, lying about imaginary economy based on debt, fueled by illegal wars, destroying ecosystems, poisoning food and water, decreasing education, increasing prisons. So you can start to see the overlap with this cult with all the other cults. In fact, because governments claims to own or have ownership over all the land and all the people within its jurisdiction. We do what politicians tell us to do, even if it harms peaceful people, because we love money more than morality. This is where consumerism and the love for materialism can come into play. But you might wonder, well, is statism human nature? And see, humans have tendencies toward both cooperation and conflict, but recent progress has been made in reducing violent behavior. An example is ending chattel slavery or the civil rights movement. Leadership involves voluntary cooperation and consent. Statism involves forceful domination against one's will. So you can still have leadership without authority. The desire for leadership, an example is if somebody is really skilled at camping, this is natural, but this differs from accepting violent rule. Statism requires extensive indoctrination and propaganda. Most living beings instinctively resist captivity and domination. If statism and authoritarian rule were truly part of human nature, we would see people actively seeking to be dominated, which is not the case. People are deceived into the relationship. They're indoctrinated into the relationship. And the Stanley Milgram experiment did show that people are able to say no to shocking their fellow man and not comply with an authority figure, but they had to have an understanding of history or their own conscience. They had to train themselves in their own morality. Additionally, the ancient philosophy of Taoism, which comes from ancient China, clarifies how our nature is that of spontaneous order, often considered the first anti-statist or anarchist philosophy. But I understand if this is totally new to you, this might come as a surprise, and you might have a lot of questions on your mind. I certainly would not blame you, as I was also coming across shocked myself when I saw this information. Perhaps we can learn more about statism through the concept of the order follower.
An order follower is a person who does what someone else commands them to do, and who has therefore attempted to abdicate their free will and their personal responsibility for choosing their own actions based upon correct determination of the morality or immorality of a particular behavior. That is the definition of what an order follower is and does. Okay, so they're just acting en route based on what someone else told them to do without making conscious judgments regarding whether that behavior is morally right or morally wrong. That's the definition. There are three main types of order followers. I call the first type the abdicators, the people who attempt to abdicate their personal responsibility. These are individuals who do what they are told to do by a perceived superior without first judging for themselves whether or not the action they've been ordered to perform is morally right or wrong. They're attempting to abdicate personal responsibility for that judgment call. Those are probably the largest group of order followers. Most order followers fall into this category. The second group is who I call the well-intentioned, and we're going to talk about intention versus reality later on, the well-intentioned but incorrect. These are individuals who erroneously believe that they have correctly determined the morality of an action that they have been commanded to perform, and so they then willfully choose to carry it out. They believe that they are doing the right thing, in other words, although that belief is not true. It is an incorrect belief. And then there are the people who just don't give a damn. There's something deeply broken in them, possibly genetically broken. These are the psychopaths, whether primary or secondary psychopaths. These are individuals who consciously do recognize the immorality of an action that they have been commanded to perform, yet they willfully choose to carry it out anyway, knowing fully that it is wrong and violates someone else's rights. That's who I call the psychopaths. They just don't care, and they're going to do violence anyway because they just want to.
Hey, what's happening, Staff Sergeant?
How you doing?
Hey, my name's Adam.
Nice to meet you.
I was in the Marines. I do a YouTube channel now called Adam versus the Man. You mind telling me what it's like being here for inauguration?
It's a great thing to be here.
Right on. Can I ask about what you think of President Obama?
Well, I support our new leader, and that's pretty much all I really feel about that.
That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. Support our leader. He's our new Commander-in-Chief, Obama. Tell us your moment to shine. Get off the
So when you enlisted, you swore an oath to the Constitution, right?
Yes.
And do you think Obama's policies are constitutional?
I don't really follow politics too much.
So you swore an oath with your life to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and you have no idea what that means?
Hey, sounds good to me, sir, if that's the way you want to put it.
Really? That's it?
That's it.
That sounds pretty dangerous. It sounds like following orders without question.
Nope, I just do what I'm told by my leaders, so that's pretty much it. I leave the politics to other people.
So you do follow orders without question?
From my leaders, yes.
Yeah. So if they told you to do something that was immoral, you wouldn't question it. You wouldn't wonder what the basis of that was, or where that order came from, or what its real purpose was. You just do it because someone told you to, and they're paying your paycheck.
Hey, whatever you want to say, sir.
Hey, don't call me sir. I was a sergeant.
There you go.
I worked for a living.
Okay.
But I got out and I found out what was wrong with following orders without questioning them. And I found out that when I was in Fallujah in 2004 with the Marine Corps Civil Affairs team, we weren't really serving the people or protecting people. We were serving the politicians and the banksters and the war profiteers. I mean, doesn't that bother you to know that you're a pawn in all that, and that you allow it to happen by just following orders without question?
Hey, whatever way you feel, sir.
Well, I'm asking how you feel.
It's not really important how I feel.
Feelings have been conditioned out of you? You're a soldier now?
However you feel, sir.
Well, is there anything else you want to say on the subject for posterity?
No, sir.
Well, let me tell you, hey, you got to stop calling me sir, man.
All right, sir.
Staff Sergeant. Oh, all right, I see how it is. Well, there's an organization called Oath Keepers, and it's about people who take their oath to that Constitution seriously and want to make sure that things like what happened in Katrina, where there were soldiers and National Guard troops asked to take away citizens' firearms who were trying to defend themselves, or troops being used against the American citizens. They want to make sure that doesn't happen. Would you be interested in having a little a more understanding of your oath and commitment to the Constitution that you swore an oath to support and defend?
I'm good the way I am, sir.
Really? Doesn't that make you part of the problem?
Hey, if there's a problem, I'm not aware of it.
Is ignorance bliss?
Could be, sir.
Could be. I don't think you're as dumb as you make yourself out to be. I think you're playing me off.
Might be, sir.
You might be. I'm pretty confident in that, actually.
All right.
You're smarter, aren't you? You know what I'm talking about.
Well, I got a job to do, sir.
What's your name, Staff Sergeant?
Bob.
What's your last name, Staff Sergeant?
That's all I got, sir.
You're a public servant, are you not?
Sounds good to me, sir.
You don't want any kind of accountability for what you're saying, do you?
No, sir.
Well, you don't have any name badge on. Special Police, Staff Sergeant Bob. Thank you for your time. I hope you'll at least take the advice of an older veteran and think about some of these issues.
Have a good day, sir.
All right, appreciate it.
Yep.
That is a member of a cult. If someone is following orders from anyone else for whatever the reason or intent, they cannot be exercising conscience, since by definition, the exercise of conscience means that someone is willfully and correctly choosing for themselves right action over wrong action. The good cop, bad cop question can be disposed of decisively. We need only consider the following. Every cop has agreed as part of their job to enforce the laws. All the laws, all of them. That is their job. That is what they have agreed to do. Many of the laws are manifestly unjust or even cruel and wicked. 3, therefore, every cop has agreed to act as an enforcer of laws that are manifestly unjust or even cruel and wicked. The inescapable conclusion based upon pure logic alone. Not even any heart-based intelligence, just pure logic by itself. The conclusion invariably is that there is no such thing as a good cop. There is no such thing as a good order follower, period, ever and never has been. So who is more morally culpable? And please read the question specifically. Who is more morally culpable? Those politicians aren't lying. Their actions didn't cause that. You could say their words had a part in it and therefore they're still morally culpable, but they didn't actually pull those triggers. They didn't drop those bombs. The order followers did those immoral behaviors. That, oh, you were just following your orders, you were just doing your job. Well, oh, okay. Well, that excuses you somehow. No, it doesn't. It doesn't excuse you of your personal responsibility to choose right action over wrong action, and never should be accepted as such. Doesn't what they actually intended in their mind matter so much? Absolutely not. It's meaningless. Intention when it comes to carrying out immoral behaviors is meaningless. Your behaviors either caused harm to another being or did not cause harm to another being. What you intended has absolutely no bearing on that. The action has all the bearing on that. No order follower ever is a truly intelligent being. No order followers are truly intelligent. Now, an order follower can be an intellectual being, but they cannot be an intelligent one. There's a huge difference between the two. Oh, you could know how to solve differential equations and solve complicated physics equations. Yeah, an order follower can do that. But what they lack is heart-based intelligence, the sacred feminine dynamic of true care. And since all order followers exhibit both forms of brain imbalance, left brain dominant tendencies when it comes to dealing with those they perceive to be their subjects, and right brain dominant tendencies when it comes to dealing with their perceived superiors, no order follower can be said to have a truly balanced brain or balanced psyche. That's the typical brain of an order follower. Those black areas are not damaged physical areas of the brain. They are areas of electrochemically deadened activity in the neocortex of the brain. Scientifically provable with the most advanced type of brain scans available today. True courage versus what people think of as courage are two vastly, dynamically different things. True courage is saying no to evil. True courage is not the absence of fear. True courage is right action in spite of fear. Cult belief number 1. We place our faith in authority. The cult of order followers rigidly believe that there is such a thing. God forbid we ever should do away with that concept. Authority is an illusion. It does not exist in nature. Authority is based entirely in violence, and it is built upon the erroneous and dogmatic belief that some people are masters who have the moral right to issue commands, while others are their slaves who have a moral obligation to obey the commands of the masters. Physical, mental, spiritual, manipulative slavery, soft mind control, any form of it. I want to see slavery in all of its forms abolished forever because it's based in violence, it's immoral, and it results in chaos and suffering. And it's unnecessary because it's self-inflicted. It's self-inflicted through the cult belief system. We have rights that others don't have. The cult of ultimate evil believes in the inequality of human rights. Order followers erroneously believe that they possess rights that others do not. Due to their cult indoctrination, they refuse to accept the truth that everyone has the exact same rights, and that no one has any more or less rights than anyone else. The cult of order followers believes that human beings can decide what rights people have or do not have. They think that comes from us, that rights come from us, that we get to make up rights based in just constructs in the mind, our whims, our likes, our preferences. The cult followers also believe that human beings are actually capable of delegating rights which do not exist. They think we can turn wrongdoings into rights and say, oh, you're allowed to do that wrongdoing. You're allowed to inflict harm upon someone else and cause suffering. You know, some magical authority can grant that to you. And they also believe that they are capable of revoking rights which actually do exist, preventing someone from carrying out an action that doesn't result in harm to another being. That's what the cult of order followers believes, that they have a right to do that, to prevent right action from being carried out. Government is our God. This supernatural entity that can grant rights or revoke rights. It can determine morality based upon its whim, the legislative stroke of a pen. I can write something down and I can make it moral. I could say the next day, oh no, we were wrong about that. That's prohibited now. Now it's immoral, and you could be punished for doing it. I mean, if you believe this, folks, you know, it's a naive child's mentality, which is what ultimately all these people are. They're people who've never grown up.
Let me see if I understand your position. Basically, would you say that it's wrong for the citizens to initiate physical force against other citizens like an armed robber does?
Unless we permit
but
that
it's okay
by law.
It's okay for the government to do so.
Because the government has been authorized by the people.
Okay, but if the government authorized armed robbers to do it, it would be okay?
If the government is that foolish to do so, I don't know what kind of country that would be, but that's legal, and if it's constitutional, so be it.
Okay, so you think that it's wrong for a citizen, an individual citizen, to initiate force against others to deprive them of their property, but it's okay for the government to do it if the majority has elected that government.
It is okay if the government is authorized to do so. The government is authorized to levy taxes, and the authorization comes from the people.
Do the individual citizens have the right to initiate physical force against other citizens that have not initiated or threatened to initiate force against anybody and haven't violated anybody's property rights?
They cannot do that because they are not authorized to do so under the law.
So individual citizens don't have that right. If they don't have the right to initiate physical force against other citizens, could they have properly delegated that right to the government?
Oh yes, they do so right now.
Can you properly delegate a right that you do not have?
You can give the right to their representatives to make laws that will authorize or make prohibitive certain activities.
So you think that you can delegate
absolutely.
a right that you don't have? You can properly delegate a right that you don't have?
You cannot tax your neighbor, but you can authorize me as your senator to vote for a program that will tax your neighbor.
Okay, so if you say that a person can properly delegate a right that they do not have, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, well, I don't have the right to use your home in Hawaii, right? But could I delegate that right to some of my friends?
No way.
Right, so you really can't delegate a right that you don't have. You have to have the right in order to delegate it, right?
We're talking about the government here.
Right, but you agreed that the individuals do not have the right.
You can authorize the government.
Right, but did you agree?
To take over my residence.
Okay, but did you agree that the individuals did not have the right to initiate force against the other individuals? They don't have that right.
No.
So,
although some people think they do.
Then they could not have delegated that right if they didn't have it.
They would delegate authority to us, their representatives, to make laws in their best interest.
So even if they don't have the right, they can delegate it to somebody else.
To make laws that might do that.
So then you think that you can actually delegate a right that you do not have. And the individuals do not have the right to initiate force against others. I would suppose,
as individuals.
Well, if they get together, then all of a sudden they have the right?
If they authorize the government to do so, yes.
Well, if
they
nobody...
authorize the government to enter into a war and kill people, that's a right.
It seems like there's a contradiction there as far as if you say that all legitimate governmental powers derive from the people. You agree that the individual citizens do not have the right to initiate force against other citizens, then it would seem clear that they cannot delegate that right to the government.
Why don't we just leave it this way? We disagree.
Why don't we just leave it at this? I'm in a cult and government is my God. Through firsthand experience of being involved in a satanic cult myself, with the cult of ultimate evil's leaders, the people who actually direct these cult members, these order followers, being around them in that satanic cult, firsthand from their lips to my ears, when I was a membership of that cult, in the membership of that cult, they expressed what they think about their order followers, the people who protect them and their agenda. And the only thing they ever call these people is their dogs or their pets, the supporters of the order followers, because they're my husband or my son or my brother, etc. And you know, not to make this any kind of a gender-related statement, but the ancillary followers of the cult are largely women because they're supporting the men who are involved in the cult, the men in their lives. They'll often support blindly. You know, because they don't want to believe they're doing something that is evil. They don't want to confront them on it. In many ways, the supporters of order followers, the ancillary members of the cult of ultimate evil, are doing more damage to the morality of human society than the order followers themselves, especially due to their vastly greater numbers. It's willful ignorance, but that's just the top portion of the tree, the leaves and the little twigs. Then we go to the branches. The refusal to own one's personal responsibility, the fear of personal responsibility. That's at a deeper level of the imbalanced psyche. Then we go deeper into the darkness, deeper into that world of dark matter that needs to be drudged up and transmuted. You know, the long dark night of the soul, the shadow material, if you will. The trunk of the tree is self-loathing, self-hatred. And the reason these people hate themselves is because they have a very deeply instilled lack of self-respect and self-esteem. And there's often an overarching, underlying reason for that. Because they have parental abandonment issues, which is what I call the roots of the tree of ultimate evil. Understanding those deep underlying psychological, often unconscious or subconscious psychological roots is where we need to go. And parental abandonment issues lies at the very, very base, at the very heart, if you will, of the psychological factors that make order followers want to continue to be order followers. They are looking for a family in proxy for one that did not exist or did not help them to become a better being. They have mommy issues and daddy issues, parental abandonment issues, whether physical, mental, psychological, emotional, or spiritual abandonment issues by their parents. And what they ultimately need is healing of that dynamic, transmutation of that dynamic by engaging with them and helping them to understand these psychological factors that are taking place within them. Until we commit to engage in that work, do not expect it to change, expect it to get worse. Because when these factors are not dealt with at a conscious level and healed at a conscious level, they eat us at a subconscious level. And eventually that subconscious level, those demons come into the real world and they eat us there too. Cult members often have a fear of chaos, of what would happen if this thing I've always known and always been a part of would suddenly be gone. How would I live? What would be my identity? How would we do things that we've been doing, with this system in place if it wasn't in place? The possibility of the manifestation of lower orders or small amounts of chaos taking place in our world must be embraced without fear. Or even, not necessarily without fear, but again, with courage. Those who believe that authority is necessary and that it must continue have actually been duped into believing that human slavery is necessary and must continue in order to prevent chaos. Violence and slavery cannot prevent chaos because violence and slavery are chaos. Those who don't know will never say no to evil. See, the lost word is not only no, N-O, but it is also no, K-N-O-W. When we know the difference between right and wrong through conscience, then we will step up and say no to evil.
If you were a soldier in World War II, right, and you were following orders, so you would bring people to the camps then. In Nazi Germany, you would bring people to the gulags, you would do all those.
I guess so. I can't really say because I wasn't alive, but if I was a soldier, good soldiers follow orders.
Do you have a conscience, like a power within you that can say no to...
Well, see, the thing is that I assume that if you said no, you were executed. So what choice did you have, technically?
Well, if nobody rebelled, then how would it ever get solved?
I don't know. It's a good question.
Coming to this realization and then having the courage to stand on it seems like quite the task. And there's a lot to unpack here, so let's look at some other statistics. You're probably familiar with the Nazi concentration camps. Well, they were also called the Lausing camps. And through public health concerns, particularly the fear of the typhus epidemic, it was used as a pretext for isolating and persecuting targeted groups. Nazi doctors and officials used the language of public health and hygiene to justify quarantine, ghettoization, and ultimately mass murder. What we saw in America was not quite different. You saw Japanese internment camps. The US government forcibly relocated and incarcerated approximately 120,000 Japanese Americans. Again, this is done under the pretense of protection. Living conditions in these camps were harsh, with families housed in Spartan barracks, subject to communal living, and surrounded by armed guards and barbed wire fences. Dr. Stanley Milgram even said himself, "I would say, on the basis of having observed 1,000 people in the experiment and having my own intuition shaped and informed by these experiments, that if a system of death camps were set up in the United States of the sort we had seen in Nazi Germany, one would find sufficient personnel for those camps in any medium-sized American town." Here's a quote from Bob Altemeyer, a psychologist also on the topic of authoritarianism. He says, "Wannabe tyrants in a democracy are just comical figures on soapboxes when they have no following. So the real threat lay coiled in parts of the population itself, ready someday to catapult the next Hitler to power with their votes." These are ultimately warning signs, and this is also studying the nature of authority. If you look through some of these World War II regimes, you will notice that they have very similar structures and methodologies to that of the US government. Everything from the flag to the Constitution to even Boy Scouts to the propaganda that is used to the certain stadiums and movies and forms of agencies and monetary use. It's all there. Even the deity-like worship. Of course, there's a lot on here. This is all from artofliberty.org. Here's a chart that looks at the connections and comparisons between several of these regimes. And there's been many books on this, like The Omnious Parallels by Leonard Peikoff, where he talks about there is this common trend between the elevation of society over the individual, and he says that these same ideas are present in America today. H.L. Mencken says the whole aim of practical politics is to keep the populace alarmed and hence clamorous to be led to safety by menacing it with an endless series of hobgoblins, all of them imaginary. Right? When you think of the concept of government and authority, or maybe something that you have to be afraid of, a person that you don't even have to interact with, someone that you don't even know, or some disease and some virus that you probably don't even understand or see yourself, these might be used to keep you in your fear of freedom. And it's one thing to become secure in yourself and feel confident, like, yeah, I am protecting myself against this thing because I understand it, and another to say, well, it's the government's responsibility and I need the government to solve this problem and for everybody else. Here's another example in history of the government poisoning alcohol within the 1920s. And again, this was done under the pretense of trying to limit people from drinking alcohol. But in this process of protection, there ends up being thousands of people that die. So is it really protecting them? You also have other things that happen in America, like U.S. Operation Mockingbird, where the CIA in the early 1950s manipulated news media for propaganda purposes. Another one you may have not known of is Operation Northwoods in 1962, where there was this pretext for military intervention in Cuba. These governments in America and elsewhere in the world will use events that are called false flags, where they blame certain parties that are not responsible for what actually happened, but they use that as an excuse to go after them. Now let's back up for a moment, because one of the leading cult experts in the country, Steven Hassan, has created what he called the influence continuum from the BITE model that he developed to help us understand what is a cult and what isn't a cult. Now, he explicitly says that there is such a thing as the cult of Trump, but what he details as the cult of Trump can also be said for the cult of statism, which implies every single president or minister or king or anybody who has the right to rule over their fellow man. They don't have their own identity. They are presuming someone that they're not. They don't have real love. They only love you so much as for their own power. If they do truly love you, then they would not rule over you and use violence over you. They do use hate. They have to have an outgroup. There is doctrine. That's the whole point of imposing their will on the population. There has to be fear and guilt. That is the mechanism by which law operates. There has to be dependency and obedience, otherwise they wouldn't be in power. Narcissists and psychopaths, they tend to go to this position because it allows them to get away with crime. Elitists, we literally call them elites. Power hungry, there's no position higher in power in the world than the government. Secretive and deceptive, well, we know about secret societies, and we know there's meetings that take place that people don't get to be a part of, and there's all sorts of conspiracies that come from the lack of transparency. Claims absolute authority. Well, with the stroke of a pen and with the declaration of almost anything that they say, they can change or alter morality or reality itself. Authoritarian structure. It's still some people over the rest of the people, and nobody has this right to rule in nature. This is a claim upon someone's life and property. It's deceptive because they are our servants and they represent us, but yet they can tax us. We can't tax them. They say that they are our servants, but meanwhile we are their servants. It clones people by creating these armies and militaries and police and creating an identity for them, not necessarily looking at morality, but legality. Ends justifies means is almost the process of every single law. For the greater good, for the common good, you have to comply and just do it. Preserves their own power. It has to be a feedback loop that enables the structure to keep on going, otherwise it would not exist. And no legitimate reasons to leave. People will say to me, well, why don't you just leave America? That's not the point. I want to see a better reality. I want to see a better country, and I want to see a world that is truly free. But if you go anywhere in the world, if there's a government, you have to comply to their rules, and you can't just leave. It doesn't work like that. They're not truly voluntary or consensual relationships. And their excuse is, well, you can just vote, and well, you can do this in this system, but there's no actual thought or conception of leaving. Of course, I dive deeper into this through my documentary, The Ugly Truth About Politics, showing just how ugly it is at every single level. It's also worth noting that Hassan acknowledges that cult-like tactics and mental manipulation are present in many corners of politics and society, and that his frameworks could be applied to other leaders, not just Trump. But it is also worth noting that his book on Trump might just highlight one political side and make people think that he is of another political affiliation or that he's pushing a certain agenda, when he wants people to perhaps see this bigger picture. Either way, the top experts on the topic of cults, you can see Stephen Hassan is among that list, but also Rick Ross, who explicitly says Trump is not a cult leader. So is he or is he not? Well, based on the understanding of statism, it helps us understand that we're not even talking about a specific leader here, are we? We can talk about the institution and the idea itself. From the Mises Institute, The Problem of Special Rights, and also from a study, the dark triad personalities are narcissism, psychopathy, and Machiavellianism. The research found that individuals with these three traits are more likely to signal virtuousness or victimhood, and the concentration of psychopaths in Washington, D.C. was far higher than in any state. And for those of you who don't live in America, Washington, D.C. is where the government is. If we look at political ponerology, the study of evil, we, they say, after all, will create a new government, one of justice. They are prepared to fight and to suffer for the sake of such a brave new world, which is also the title of Aldous Huxley's book. And he says subordinating a normal person to psychologically abnormal individuals has severe and deforming effects on his or her personality. It engenders trauma and neurosis. Notice he also emphasizes the idea of safety and prosperity and how the psychopath dreams of a utopia, a happy world, a social system which does not reject them or force them to submit to laws and customs whose meaning is incomprehensible to them. It's about creating their world, and then they put it under the language of we to make it sound like it's all of our visions. Looking at the word Machiavelli, it comes from the book The Machiavellians. And here's a quote: criticism of the group is personal libel against the leader. Criticism of the leader is subversion and treason against the group. And he says that there's this sincere conviction of their own value and of the services which they have rendered to the common cause. Gustave Le Bon talks about a study of the popular mind. He says the functions of governments necessarily increase in proportion as the indifference and helplessness of the citizens grow, and the state becomes an all-powerful god. Michael Huemer breaks down what Stockholm Syndrome is and shares that there's 4 precursors. First, the captor poses a credible threat to the life of the captive victim. Second, the victim perceives some kind of kindness on part of the captor. However, this kindness might consist only in a relative lack of abuse or a failure to kill the victim. Third, the victim is isolated from the outside world and subjected only to the captor's perspective. And then fourth, the victim sees himself as unable to escape. And then he explains that each of these precursors are used by governments. We even see physical changes in the brain when it comes to power. People under the influence of power often become more impulsive, less risk-aware, and less empathetic. Power impairs the brain's mirroring process, which is crucial for empathy. This means powerful people may struggle to understand others' perspectives, which is why you see this power paradox that people with empathy and social intelligence will have these very same functions diminish once they gain power. Here's another study showing a disorder of the possession of power. Its 14 clinical features include manifest contempt for others, loss of contact with reality, restless or reckless actions, and displays of incompetence. Now again, we might be looking at the leader, but then the question asks, well, what about the follower? What if there is a mirroring effect happening as above, so below? One of my favorite ways to understand this whole dynamic is what Jeremy Sherman shares here as the authoritarian act. Anyone who agrees with you proves you're the triumphant hero. Anyone who disagrees with you proves you're the victimized hero. Moment to moment, you're a hero no matter what. Of course, your real mission is maintaining the appearance of absolute authority. Feel free to change your mission moment to moment. That's easy too, since it doesn't matter what you say. Power sets you free. Pretend you're free and it will look like you have power. If you ignore what you say while insisting on it as the last word, the gullible will be seduced into supporting you, and the skeptical will get suckered into trying to debate you. Everything that happens can be used to your benefit. And that's what precisely makes cult behavior and authority so dangerous, is that so long as people are dependent, so long as they have traumas or projections or issues within themselves, they can be manipulated. They can be used for an agenda. Louis Sedin talks about the psychological roots of authority. Many individuals have a fear of chaos and disorder, leading them to support authoritarian structures that promise stability, predictability, security, and control which can be comforting. Dependency on authority figures mirrors the dependency children have on their parents, and authoritarian structures provide a way to avoid the anxiety that we feel by limiting choices and responsibilities. Here's another slide. Internalization happens unconsciously as people absorb the values and beliefs propagated by the regime. Internalization is one of the most insidious aspects of authoritarianism. Emotional bonds, resistance to change, and symbolic power all make it harder to disobey. And not to mention, if our schooling system teaches us obedience and keeps us as a child prolonged in the childish mindset of I want to rule the world or I need mommy and daddy to fix the world for me, then we may not be really practicing self-ownership or self-responsibility or mere maturity. Roger Dedown, a psychoanalyst, talks about the psychological process of projection, where individuals project their own undesirable traits onto others. This mechanism is frequently used in authoritarian regimes to create scapegoats, fostering unity and obedience among the populace by directing aggression towards an external enemy. He suggests that psychoanalysis can help individuals and societies recognize and overcome the unconscious forces driving authoritarianism, the things you don't see. Even Mark Passio made the connection, saying that the left wing in the current day and age is more of that mother figure and the right wing is more of that father-like figure, the protector or the nurturer. Edwin O. Wilson, a biologist, said that we have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology, and that is the real problem of humanity. And yet, if you go online, you might come across channels that talk about the nature of cults. And much like some of the cult experts, they completely ignore the topic of politics or the idea of statism at large. And if we wonder about history in regards to these governments, you can look at something like Alexander Tytler or Arnold Toynbee. But these historians also don't consider the nature of statism or the right to rule. Larkin Rose has done extensive work on this topic, like his seminar The Nature of the Beast, where he goes into toxic narcissism, or even The Gospel According to Government, where he directly shows how it functions like a religion. He even did a video titled A Candidate We Can Trust, demonstrating how you can have a candidate sound perfect and say everything that you want and makes perfect sense, and it still deceives you. It still plays into statism. Abraham Maslow, who created the hierarchy of needs chart, even would share his thoughts on this matter. From Dennis Fox, a psychologist and lawyer who also admitted that there's not many works on philosophical anarchism in relationship to psychology, and saying that most intellectuals don't know much about this either, he was actually using a quote directly from Maslow on the topic. And he also mentions that many anthropologists have contended that small egalitarian anarchy is the oldest polity and one which has characterized most of human history. Clearly, the anthropological record does not support Hobbes in any way, which people often like to use as an excuse to say there would be the state of nature or a state of chaos without government. He says that stateless societies seem less violent and brutish than those with the state, referencing several sources. Even Carl Jung talked about the failure of limited government, where he says in actual fact society is nothing more than an abstract idea like the state. Both are hypostatized, that is, have become autonomous. The state in particular is turned into a quasi-animate personality from whom everything is expected. The constitutional state drifts into the situation of a primitive form of society, namely the communism of a primitive tribe where everybody is subject to the autocratic rule of a chief or an oligarchy. Dennis Fox even shared how Benjamin Rush, who is known as the father of psychiatry, would create a diagnosis of anarchia, which is related to oppositional defiant disorder. And remember, this is someone who signed the Declaration of Independence, and he applied this diagnosis to any of the resistors to federal authority whose excess of the passion for liberty constituted a form of insanity. And don't forget, Benjamin Rush was the same individual who said that we need to have strict obedience to authority figures rather than your own parents. So in a way, when we look at psychology or we look at health, there's a great correlation with the topic of authoritarianism and understanding what causes the problems in our society on a grand scale. I have a whole project dedicated to this on healthrevealed.org, which I encourage you to check out because there are many other researchers and slides which I have not covered here that go much deeper into this information. We'll take a look at some very basic freedoms that people are expressing that seem to go against the American government. In fact, Some of these freedoms that are practiced in the following videos are trying to help people gain their freedom, and it's completely peaceful and innocent.
Permit, right? No, sir. Can't be here.
Hail to the freedom!
Beautiful
There you
place.
are, dearie. Have a lovely afternoon. Thank you. Oh, my pleasure. Thanks a lot.
There's no vending on Capitol grounds. You guys are aware of that?
It's a free country, ma'am.
And you guys are continuing.
So you want lemonade? Yeah? Did you want a cup?
10 cents for some lemonade, guys.
2 more?
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your business.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Would you like a cup as well?
Yes, don't be intimidated. Don't be intimidated. Don't be intimidated by them.
How you doing? Don't take pictures.
Whoa, whoa!
of us.
Hey!
Out of our face.
Private property. You got that on camera. Please don't break equipment, man. Voluntary. Being hurt by No money. No money. They want to give you something for free. They'll give it to you for free. Do not give them any money.
10 cents. 10 cents.
Don't give them any money. We are free people.
Have a good afternoon.
This is vending without a permit. Get out of my face. Vending without a permit. So you guys want to be arrested for your cause of lemonade liberation.
Ma'am, come liberate the lemons. Lemonade, 10 cents, guys. 10 cents lemonade.
10 cents lemonade. Come get your 10 cents lemonade while it's nice and cold. Do not use violence. Do not use violence and force against peaceful people.
Ma'am, this is not an option anymore. You are under
Leave
arrest.
these people alone.
I'm sorry, you're under arrest.
Leave these people alone. Leave them alone.
I am getting arrested for selling lemonade. Do you guys have services?
Lemonade, 10 cents, guys. We've got a few cups
That's what
left.
happens when you sell lemonade.
Your tax dollars! No victims, no crime! Nothing but kidnappers! Selling lemonade is not a crime.
Segregation was a crime in the 50s. Would you enforce that law?
Unfortunately, I wouldn't be an officer back then at that time.
Exactly.
If it was, I would enforce it, though.
You would enforce it?
Absolutely.
If you would enforce the segregation law?
I don't make the laws, I just enforce them, sir. The squad was not with the police, it's with the lawmakers. I think it's absurd, and I'm sure most people do. Yeah. But I got a good job that pays me about 6 figures, and I'm not losing it, you know. They tell me, like, you got it.
Peacefully speaking and handing information to other people. These gentlemen have violated our constitutionally protected rights to free speech without cause.
Jim, I was trying to leave. We're all brothers and sisters. I stopped giving them out.
Peace officers across the street, do your duty!
Sisters.
Do your duty!
We're not against law enforcement.
You are not doing your duty. You are negligent of your duty, sir.
This is ridiculous. It really is.
Why has this man been arrested? Peace officer to do their duty.
Is passing out flyers a crime?
Our rights are being violated.
I advise you take a step back, please.
Our rights are being violated. You are losing your constitutionally protected rights to freedom of speech.
Step back.
We were peacefully engaging people with information, peacefully, which is our natural right to do
and then he
so.
started chasing me down the block as I try to leave.
Which one chased you?
These individuals accosted us and are holding us against our will
that guy right
under
there?
duress.
That guy can run?
We harmed
He didn't
no
run,
other
'cause I
living
was walking
individual.
away calmly.
We have harmed
And then he
no
said that was
other
resisting.
living
Because I didn't
individual.
listen to him.
We
I
were
said I want to leave
speaking
and go
and
home.
peacefully
I didn't give out
engaging
any more of those
people,
flyers
which is our
when he said to.
constitutional
So you're passing out flyers, and that's why you've been detained here.
Yeah.
City of Brotherly Love. All right. What do you think you get extra rights because you got a badge? Well, what if I wanted to put handcuffs on you because I didn't like the information you were distributing?
The thing is, today is this guy, tomorrow is us. For what reason? This is us. This is a. What are you teaching the kids? I don't understand this. Like today it's him, tomorrow it's us because we may say something and not agree with something someone else says.
That's right.
I'm not understanding this. This is children are watching this. This is what you're teaching. My children's great-grandfather was a signer on the Declaration of Independence. Robert Treat Payne, and you're teaching these kids we just came to look at this, that this is how we treat people who have a different freedom of speech?
Yep, pretty much.
I don't understand this.
Wow. Now I'm free to go. They've decided it's time I can go.
Did they charge you with a crime?
Apparently, I was interfering with agency function and failure to obtain a permit, which I believe the group probably has a permit. Who knows? I don't even know that.
Since when do we need a permit
I don't know.
to exercise our freedom of speech?
Apparently, since these violent officials decided so.
Are you okay?
I'm okay, but my arms are in pain.
Are you okay?
My legs are asleep.
Yeah, I want my
and
flyer so
my
I can
freedom
continue
is not
to engage
okay.
people.
Well, who stole your property?
They stole it. Those people.
Which of you stole his property?
Right
Return
there.
the stolen property right now. Who's got his stolen property? The papers that he had. I thought we're supposed to be secure in our persons and our papers.
Apparently not.
Who stole them?
This one here.
Which guy? That guy?
This one with the cat.
You, with the stolen property. Could you please return that?
Sir, it's evidence.
Evidence of what? Evidence of First Amendment?
About their case. So
these violations.
Why do you need all of them? You can't even look anyone in the eye. It's not even human beings.
Go home and tell your kids what you did here today.
Update after the state threw away thousands of dollars in raw milk. Now, this happened on a Cass County dairy farm.
Representatives from the Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development, or MDARD, were back at the farm today to dispose of more products.
Search on Your Side's newest member, Callie Lichter, tells us how much money the farm operators think they lost.
This morning, 2 staff from MDARD came to Nourish Cooperative to oversee the disposal of the rest of the raw dairy products into this dumpster that you see behind me. Now, speaking to a manager at the cooperative, she estimates that they lost about $90,000 worth of product, but are still waiting on that official number from the department.
But they came on that day with a cease and desist letter already printed out.
Nourish co-founder Ashley Armstrong says there were some issues with the labels on the raw dairy product, but that it was taken care of by their team.
And yet we still were told it's illegal to sell raw dairy as pet food, and all of it had to be destroyed. That I can drive to a pet food store throughout the state of Michigan and buy raw goat milk. So I'm a little bit confused as to why we can't.
Armstrong says they applied for a pet food license this past March, and MDARD says they worked with Nourish to get them properly licensed to sell human and animal food.
So everything else is fine to sell now. Like that's what it's just funny that like they say, okay, it's good now. Everything is good except for the raw dairy. But I don't think that we are going to be able to sell raw dairy based on what they're telling us.
Starting as a startup last September, Nourish says the regulations, like ones on raw dairy, hurt small-scale farming.
I wish that there weren't as many like really tight, stringent regulations that make it really hard to do that, because the regulations allow for larger farms, big agriculture companies to really take hold of certain food.
And there are raids on many family farms, and there are people growing sunflowers in their yard that get attacked by the city and have to go to court for many years on end just to grow a simple plant. And there's HOA neighborhoods where if you don't have a perfect lawn, you're going to be attacked. I mean, there's so many weird things that you'd think we would be free to have in America, the land of the free. Let me give you some examples. You can't feed the homeless, you can't expose secrets, you must use licenses and permits, you're required to register your birth, you must join the army if needed, you can't collect rainwater, you must use money, you're required to use a passport to travel, you must send your kids to school, you must keep all your bills and receipts, you must not grow certain plants, you must pay 20 to 40% of your income, you can't drink raw milk, you can't actually say what you want. If you break any rules, you'll have to pay or be locked in a cage. Now you have to go to school, get a job, get married, get a mortgage, consume, obey, and die. I think it's a really good graphic to show just how crazy it is. And you might agree with some of these things on the list being bad, like you might not like marijuana and you might not like raw milk. But would you educate your fellow man, or would you forcibly use your own will to say, man, you should not do this. I'm going to tell you what to do with your own body and the substances that you consume. Just how much do we want to protect people for their own good and create a utopia and purist vision of society, claiming that we're representing them while in reality ruling over them? Well, let us take a look at modern day politics.
You must remember the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, and the Bible, along with stories of the first colonists, the founding, and the pioneer experience. America is a nation founded on ideas, that American citizenship depends upon intellectual clarity and engagement, and a sense, a grasp of the nation's founding principles. We are born Americans, but in a sense we become Americans.
In typical Donald Trump fashion, he's trying to keep you looking at the shiny object up here, which is his constant attacks on this federal judge, a distinguished man appointed by President Obama with a great legal record, so you don't look down here at all the scum that came out of Trump University. Now, listen, look, I'm appalled. We can have differences in politics. You know, I've probably been criticized, just conservatively, let me say, a lot. But, if it's about politics, hey, I don't agree with your position. Hey, we can do it a better job. That's totally fair. That's how we get to make decisions in a democracy. We are trying to elect a president, not a dictator.
If this were a dictatorship, it'd be a heck of a lot easier. Just so long as I'm the dictator.
My mother believed that life is about serving others. And she taught me never to back down from a bully, which it turns out was pretty good. Don't let anyone tell you that great things can't happen in America. Barriers can come down. Justice and equality can win. Our history has moved in that direction, slowly at times, but unmistakably, thanks to generations of Americans who refuse to give up or back down.
Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories concerning the attacks of September the 11th, malicious lies that attempt to shift the blame away from the terrorists themselves.
I am not a dictator. I'm the president. So ultimately, if Mitch McConnell or John Boehner say we need to go to catch a plane, I can't have Secret Service block the doorway, right? So I understand, and I know that this has been some of the conventional wisdom that's been floating around Washington, that somehow, even though most people agree that I'm being reasonable, that most people agree I'm presenting a fair deal, the fact that they don't take it means that I should somehow, do a Jedi mind meld with these folks and convince them to do what's right.
That's why I'm trying to do something about it by stimulating the export, investing more, better education systems. Thank you. Glad to clarify.
Tell me how it's affected you again. You know people who've lost their jobs and lost their homes? Well, I've been governor of a small state for 12 years. I'll tell you how it's affected me. Every year, Congress and the president sign laws that make us do more things and gives us less money to do it with. I see people in my state, middle-class people, their taxes have gone up in Washington and their services have gone down, while the wealthy have gotten tax cuts. I have seen what's happened in this last 4 years when, in my state, when people lose their jobs, there's a good chance I'll know them by their names. When a factory closes, I know the people who ran it. When the businesses go bankrupt, I know them. And I've been out here for 13 months, meeting in meetings just like this ever since October, with people like you all over America, people that have lost their jobs, lost their livelihood, lost their health insurance. What I want you to understand is the national debt is not the only cause of that. It is because America has not invested in its people. It is because we have not grown. It is because we've had 12 years of trickle-down economics. We've gone from 1st to 12th in the world in wages. We've had 4 years where we produced no private sector jobs. Most people are working harder for less money than they were making 10 years ago. It is because we are in the grip of a failed economic theory. And this decision you're about to make better be about what kind of economic theory you want. Not just people saying, I'm going to go fix it, but what are we going to do? What I think we have to do is invest in American jobs, American education, control American health care costs, and bring the American people together again.
In our fast-changing world, traditions like the White House Correspondents' Dinner are important.
I mean, really, what is this dinner? And why am I required to come to it? Jeb Bush, do you really want to do this?
Because despite our differences, we count on the press to shed light on the most important issues of the day.
And we can count on Fox News to terrify old white people with some nonsense. Sharia law is coming to Cleveland, run for the damn hills. Y'all's ridiculous.
We won't always see eye to eye.
Oh, and CNN, thank you so much for the wall-to-wall Ebola coverage. For 2 whole weeks, we were one step away from the Walking Dead.
Protecting our democracy is more important than ever. For example, the Supreme Court ruled that the donor who gave Ted Cruz $6 million was just exercising free speech.
Yeah, it's the kind of speech like this. I just wasted $6 million.
And it's not just Republicans. Hillary will have to raise huge sums of money, too.
Oh, yeah. She gonna get that money. He gonna get all the money.
Non-stop focus on billionaire donors creates real problems for our democracy.
And that's why we're running for a third term.
No, we're not.
We're not?
No.
Who the hell said that?
Look at what's happening right now. Every serious scientist says we need to act. The Pentagon says it's a national security risk. Miami floods on a sunny day, and instead of doing anything about it, we've got elected officials throwing snowballs in the Senate.
Constant attack coming from Republican side, the sort of vitriol that's pouring out, I don't think that's going to wear well over the next several months. So I feel confident that Hillary will be the nominee, and I feel confident she'll be the next president.
No regrets? I know that before you said that you didn't run, that you knew that it was the right decision for your family. But
look, I had planned on running. It's an awful thing to say. I think I would have been the best president, but it was the right thing, not just for my family, for me. No one should ever seek the presidency unless they're able to devote their whole heart and soul and passion into just doing that.
I led the country through the COVID crisis. Today, we have the strongest economy in the world. I passed a law that lowers prescription drug prices, caps insulin at $35 a month for seniors. For 4 years, Donald Trump tried to pass an infrastructure law, and he failed. I got it done. Now we're rebuilding America. I passed the biggest law in history to combat climate change because our future depends on it. Donald Trump took away the freedom of women to choose. I'm determined to make Roe v. Wade the law of the land again. Donald Trump believes the job of the president is to take care of Donald Trump. I believe the job of the president is to fight for you, the American people.
Mr. President, you've made it a practice of not commenting on potential personnel moves.
Of course I did.
Calling it speculation.
You can understand why. Because
Friday,
we got people's reputations at stake. And on Friday, I stood up and said, I don't appreciate the speculation about Don Rumsfeld. He's doing a fine job. I strongly support him.
Well, what do you say to critics who believe that you're ignoring the advice of retired generals, military commanders, who say that there needs to be a change?
I say I listen to all voices, but mine's the final decision. And Don Rumsfeld is doing a fine job. He's not only transforming the military, he's fighting a war on terror. He's helping us fight a war on terror. I have strong confidence in Don Rumsfeld. I hear the voices, and I read the front page, and I know the speculation, but I'm the decider, and I decide what is best.
Who says I am not under the special protection of God? What do you think about that? Do you think...
I feel like that's okay.
That's okay?
If Trump's an atheist, that's okay.
I do not see why man should not be as cruel as nature. Well, why do you think he comes up with that?
Well, man is the cruelest animal.
Great liars are also great magicians.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Well, I think that, you know, he's going to lie in any way, probably to, like, support the country, to keep the country going.
Good.
There'll be good lies, you know?
So you support everything that he's kind of said in this pamphlet here and in these quotes, right?
Of course. Yeah. I'm a Trump fan.
Because Trump,
you know?
Because Trump said it.
Now, when he reveals the quotes are really Hitler's comments, their reactions are hysterical.
I'd say you're lying to me.
They are, though. They're quotes from Hitler.
You made this pamphlet and did that? Oh my God. I'm definitely not down with racism.
So do you still support Trump?
Yeah, but I don't support Hitler.
Well, but you support these quotes, though, right?
Well, if Donald Trump said him, I'd support him.
It's not the truth that matters, but the victory. Trump or Hitler? Hitler.
Hitler?
Yeah. Trump.
Trump. Trump.
Hitler. I've no idea.
I reckon
Trump?
Hitler, but like I feel like it might be Trump as well, because like that's the whole point of this, that they're probably gonna be Trump. Trump, yeah.
I'm Trump on that.
Trump.
It was actually Hitler. I play to people's fantasies. I call it truthful hyperbole. Trump or Hitler? I think Hitler.
Yeah, Trump doesn't know. Yeah. Could be Hitler.
Hitler?
Yeah.
Trump wouldn't know how to say that. Hitler.
Trump. Definitely Trump.
Trump. Hitler.
Hitler. No, that's Hitler. Trump's not that clever. Doesn't know what hyperbole means. I'm going Trump.
Trump.
Why ain't Hitler?
Yeah.
I imagine Trump saying hyperbole.
Yeah, probably Hitler.
Okay.
It was in fact Trump. Make the lie big, keep it simple, keep saying it, and people will believe it.
That was definitely Trump. We'll go for Hitler.
Say Hitler.
Trump. Trump, yeah. Yeah, Trump.
Hitler. Hitler?
Trump. I'm going to disagree with Trump.
Trump. Yeah, Trump.
Hitler. Hitler.
Trump. It was actually Hitler that said that.
I wake up determined to deliver a better life for the people all across this nation that have been ignored, neglected, and abandoned. I have visited the laid-off factory workers. These are people who work hard but no longer have a voice. I am your voice.
He speaks and his people sit up at attention. I want my people to do the same.
What did you mean just now when you said you wished Americans would sit up at attention when you...
I'm kidding. You don't understand sarcasm.
I am the chosen one.
They are a cult that follows Donald Trump. And whatever he says, they will do. Forget what positions you support. Do you want to support a group of people who are about one person in a cult more than they are about the good of the American people?
Nobody knows this stuff better than me.
Nobody knows more about taxes than I do and income than I do.
Nobody knows more about construction than I do.
Nobody knows more about campaign finance than I do.
Nobody knows consultants better than me.
I know more about drones than anybody.
I have joined the political arena so that the powerful can no longer beat up on people who cannot defend themselves. Nobody knows the system better than me, which is why I alone can fix it.
That gave his followers all of the confirmation they needed to fully deify Donald Trump, to thrust upon him the mandate of heaven itself.
Many people say it was a providential moment. Probably was.
I have no doubt that God lowered a shield of protection over President Trump.
God Almighty intervened because America is one nation under God, and he is certainly not finished with President Trump.
By the grace of God, divine intervention, and your guardian angels above, you survived.
They're using this moment to combine the elements of a tradition of cultism and fascism with, which I think is sacrilegious, with basically religious overtones.
We pledge to you that we will root out the communists, Marxists, fascists, and the radical left thugs that live like vermin within the confines of our country. They're poisoning the blood of our country. That's what they've done. I said, no, they're not humans. They're not humans. They're animals. I'll use the word animal because that's what they are. You got to get these people back where they came from. You have no choice. You're going to lose your culture. You're going to lose your country. Does anybody believe in genes? You guys believe in genetics?
A murderer, I believe this. It's in their genes. And we got a lot of bad genes in our country right now.
It's the enemy from within, all the scum that we have to deal with that hate our country. I am your retribution. I am your retribution. For too long, politicians have tried, oh, have they tried, to centralize authority among the hands of a small few in our nation's capital. I see them all the time. Bureaucrats think they can run over your lives, overrule your values, meddle in your faith, and tell you how to live, what to say, and where to pray. But we know that parents, not bureaucrats, know best how to raise their children and create a thriving society. And above all else, we know this. In America, we don't worship government, we worship God. Our religious liberty is enshrined in the very First Amendment in the Bill of Rights. The American founders invoked our Creator 4 times in the Declaration of Independence. We don't want to see God forced out of the public square, driven out of our schools, or pushed out of our civic life. As long as I am president, no one is going to stop you from practicing your faith or from preaching what is in your heart.
Nobody can do it like me. Nobody. Nobody can do it like me. Honestly.
Nobody's stronger than me.
Nobody has better toys than I do.
There's nobody bigger or better at the military than I am.
Nobody loves the Bible more than I do. Nobody builds walls better than me. The people, my people are so smart. And you know what else they say about my people? The polls. They say, I have the most loyal people. Did you ever see that? Where I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I wouldn't lose any voters, okay? It's like incredible.
Do you not see stability in the royal family in the sense that they have always been there and kind of, if they do continue, will always be there, whereas politicians kind of come and go?
Yeah. Yes.
And politicians, are in 1 minute and then somebody does something and all of a sudden they're ousted. And also, it's typically, you'll always have kind of 50% of the country that dislikes any particular kind of head of state, and so aren't the figures just on paper for the royal family better than any politician in history?
Perhaps, but aren't you troubled by the incessant referral to these people as Highness and Majesty? We could start by getting rid of these ridiculous garments. We spent most of the time that we've known
dressed
King
like
Charles
you?
dressed like me.
I mean, come on.
And so to see him for the first time...
You're the king dressed like you. No offence.
Well,
but...
he'd probably put on a tie.
Huh?
He'd look more like you, I suppose.
Yes.
To see him suddenly put on these robes would be like watching Rishi Sunak or someone suddenly
but it's
don
part
these
of our history.
ludicrous
and actually,
robes,
it gives us something so few other countries in the world have.
Nobody can take it seriously.
And you may not like
Nobody
it. You
can take it seriously.
But many
You're in that age group that is apparently not as content with the monarchy. Where do you stand on that? Is that you and your peers?
It's not that we're not content, it's that we don't care. I mean, this has nothing to do with
why
our
don't
lives.
You care? Why don't, I mean, this is it's our constitution.
You're
a journalist,
you don't
the
care.
backbone of our system.
Doesn't that say something?
1 year on, that she is looking down on all of us tonight. Happy we're together, continuing to spotlight such an incredible community.
Looking down on us, that's an interesting choice of words.
Well, I've always felt...
That's pedantic, sure.
Yeah,
Come on.
that's merely mad.
I'm just saying it's
a turn of phrase, Alex.
And it's an appropriate one, I think.
But we bow in courtroom. We're bowing to the institution, not the individual.
But we don't.
It's the system we look at.
We don't
it's
bow
anachronistic.
in allegiance.
Lots of traditions. You can't necessarily justify. Getting married. That's a bit of a whack.
we don't bow.
We kind of run with it. It sort of works.
We don't bow in allegiance to a quote liege lord who is apparently somebody with a right to rule over us
but do you shake
by
hands?
birthright.
Do you wear a tie? I mean, there's all sorts of ridiculous.
Members of Parliament bow, lower their heads towards the Speaker when they come in, and the mace.
No problem with that, especially because look.
Okay. Listen, there's nothing intrinsically more modern about a republic. When the republics became totally corrupt and useless in ancient Rome, they replaced them. What did they replace them with? A monarchy.
And what happens when the monarchy becomes corrupt? I don't think it's serious to suggest that this institution will still be around in 100, let alone...
Don't worry.
Matt, I'm a Republican now. Trump's not on the Epstein list, and I think all illegal immigrants should be deported.
Justice, I thought you hated politics. Also, aren't your grandparents illegal immigrants?
Whoa. Matt, I'm a Democrat now, and I think trans and reproductive rights should be our #1 priority as a country.
Justice, you're a straight male.
Matt, I am a socialist now. I took all of your money from your wallet to redistribute to everyone in apartment complex.
Give me my money back and stop with the politics.
Matt, I'm in the Green Party now, and I think we need to have more plants in our apartment to help with the environment.
Why are you dressed like a plant? Enough with the politics!
Matt, I'm in the America Party now. I downloaded my consciousness into a Tesla robot. All hail Elon Musk.
That's not even a real political party! You need to stop!
Matt, I'm an anarchist now. I believe there should be no political parties. The system is corrupt.
Justice, you're going insane! Enough with the politics!
Matt, I'm done with politics. They all suck. I don't know what I'm talking about, and I honestly think I'm not even gonna vote.
Well, Justice, you have to vote. It's your civil duty as an American.
Comedy could definitely display truth, which is why George Carlin also said he does not vote. Apparently, being intellectual means being indoctrinated, being obedient, knowing the system, all the amendments, the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, or whatever. See, Trump constantly is attacking. Meanwhile, they are attacking Trump. Wow, Hillary is so fair, so open. We are electing a president, not a dictator. I'm not a dictator. I gotta tell you, I'm not a dictator, right? And ask yourself, did anything that Hillary say actually sound bad? Let us not tolerate conspiracy theories. That basically means don't question us. The media is attacking Obama and Bush, but oh, the media is attacking Trump. I have seen it. I know them. I will fix it. I have been meeting with people all across America. Thanks, Clinton. Thanks, Trump. Wait, didn't Mussolini also do that? We need to invest in America. Thanks, Bill Clinton. Oh wait, is that Trump? Why are we all here doing this? She's gonna get all the money. I would have been the best president. Thanks, Biden. Heart, soul, passion into it. Yeah, wow. You know, strongest economy in the world. I am the decider. I decide what is best. Yeah, great leadership. Alpha male. Let's go. I am your voice. Oh, interesting. I have the most loyal people. I can shoot somebody and nobody would care. Okay, wow. Okay, very interesting. Yeah, let's bring someone on stage in front of cameras, in front of the crowd. People will like me more because of that. Trump is in the cult, and this is not what the American people deserve, and there is good that the American people deserve, and it's not with Trump's cult. Meanwhile, pushing their own side, saying that they're not in a cult, meanwhile definitely promoting some sort of ideology around a certain figure. And this concept of America, really, what is this? I alone can fix it. The powerful can no longer beat up people who can't defend themselves. Parents know best how to raise their children. Oh, really? Okay, if parents know best, then can they choose not to bring their kids to the school system, which is owned by the government? In America, we don't worship government, we worship God. But yet, our First Amendment is enshrined. Our founding fathers invoked our Creator. As long as I'm president, I will protect your religion. Yeah, because you need the government's permission to practice religion. But I thought we don't worship government, we worship God. Now let's go to the UK. Politicians are always so corrupt, people always disagree, so we need the royal family, we need a monarchy, because it makes us special and we know who's in charge. It's easy to understand. See, the common trend here is that people are stuck in their own worldview. They don't criticize the fundamental system, and anybody who does gets attacked. People care a whole lot about words and identities, purism, ideology, don't they? Willing to obey and be ruled over. They don't realize that all the authoritarian regimes say the same exact thing. It doesn't matter if it was Trump or Kamala or Biden or Clinton or Bush, etc. You say what people want to hear, and then people keep playing the game. And there's always an outlet for people to release in the political game, including the position of the anarchist, as you saw with the final clip, which I thought was fantastic, showing, hey, I am part of the right, I'm part of the left, oh, I'm part of the Green Party, oh, I'm part of the Soviet Union, oh, I'm just gonna go against all of them and be an anarchist now. That might not be any better, because this anarchist could actually just be trying to rebel, trying to fight against the system and not building any system in replacement, not seeing the peaceful coexistence, voluntary cooperation part of it, and just saying, man, I want to rebel and we got to create something new and everything needs to tear down. And then they attach to their own ideologies and their own symbols and their own colors, the black and red or black and yellow or whatever. And let me tell you, I was quite the fanatic myself. Take a look at these pictures and I find them quite embarrassing looking back on them, but you know what? It's part of the growth and maturity process. I had the Trump shirt, I had the Trump water bottle, I had the pins, I had it as my phone cover, as my computer cover, I had the lawn signs, I wrote it on chalkboards, I had the flags, I was there at the rallies, I took photos with other people. They said I should be president. I even wrote articles talking about Big Pharma and how he cares about, health, and I would even go in video games and debate with people about it. I'd even name my own characters after it. This is not healthy, this is fanaticism, and especially me justifying my worldview, throwing everything into it, using health, using nature, all to justify this underlying belief system. Just look at how emotionally invested people become in this game of politics. I was one of these people. And we fall right into this trap because we believe it's our only hope. We see this as, wow, they're going to help change our reality. They give us a sense of meaning, purpose, community, the same things cults provide. They help us feel a part of something much larger than ourselves, and we can't think of any other alternative. Especially when the world is falling apart, we feel like we have no choice. But if you look at the rallies between Obama and Clinton and Trump, virtually the same reactions of people crying on their knees, begging, pleading for change with signs and creating homemade materials and putting their own money into it, even though they don't really know these people. And then you have videos like this: we're experts in fascism, we're leaving the US. And it says fascism is here, trust us. Yeah, we gotta trust the experts. It's another form of obedience. If you're not following them, follow us. We know better. We're the rebels. We're the ones fighting against the political system. And ignore the things that come out that show our secrecy and weird, perverted habits. And keep having debates talking about culture and sex and gender while we continue to rule over you. They're never gonna be honest and go on stage and say how a law is carried out and philosophy and psychology. It's of no interest to them. They're interested in your vote. They're interested in their own power. And this is the way politics is designed, even if someone is well-intentioned. But just how far back does this ritual, this game go? Because we just talked about modern day politics, and then we talked about World War II and what happened not even 100 years ago. What if we go back to the origins of human civilization?
The imperial cult of ancient Rome was a state religion that deified the emperor and sometimes members of his family after his death, and encouraged cultural and political unity. The emperor himself was not regarded as an immortal and all-powerful god, but while he held that title, he represented the divine authority of the Roman state. So the imperial cult actually encouraged worship of the state as embodied in the emperor, not the individual person. Though some emperors would claim otherwise, that worked through the individual for the greater good, through the figure of Dea Roma, the goddess of Rome, who personified the state. This deity was understood as a genius who protected, nurtured, and helped direct Rome. Even earlier though, the mythical king Romulus, the founder of Rome, was understood to have become the god Quirinus, later known as a state god. And so the idea of a king, later an emperor, as a god went back as far as the Kingdom of Rome between 753 and 509 BCE. Caesar had been deified as Divus Julius by 44 BCE and was called Pater Patriae and given all honours on par with state gods. Augustus, as his adopted son, could already claim to be a son of God and had accepted the honorific of Augustus from the Senate, the august or majestic one, but didn't want to push his luck by accepting the godlike status of a cult. At the same time, as a clever politician, he saw the benefits of a cult clearly. It would encourage support of his reign and lessen the chances of disputes over succession. And as the cult would be established outside of Rome in the eastern provinces, it seemed it would do more good than harm. So he granted the delegation their request to honor his genius, not his person, and the imperial cult was officially born. An emperor had to be nominated by someone, and then the Senate would vote on deifying him posthumously. That emperor was now understood to be living among the gods, and could be appealed to for assistance like any other deity. Living emperors had cults established to their genius or their numen, divine power, but were not considered gods themselves. The deified emperor had a temple built in his honor, where sacrifices were made to him in asking for help or in giving thanks. A statue of the emperor was raised in the temple complex, just as with any other god, and his cult had its own clergy and organized public events in his honor. The act of paying homage to the emperor was the focus of the cult. Whether one actually believed the emperor was now among the gods was irrelevant. Christianity also played a part in the decline of the cult, as many Christians, though not all, regarded it as a form of idolatry and refused to pay homage. Many ancient and modern writers have pointed to Christianity's role in the overall decline and fall of the Roman Empire, in that by refusing to participate in the communal act of homage to the imperial cult, as well as those of the other state-sponsored gods, Rome lost the kind of social cohesion such cults encouraged. When Constantine the Great legitimized Christianity after 312 CE, the imperial cult gradually lost more and more significance. It was never abolished. People just didn't pay attention to it anymore.
Only emperors who had ruled well were worthy of inclusion among the gods. The emperors did not owe their divinity to supernatural abilities, but to the simple fact of their power over the lives of millions. The emperors actively promoted the cult to encourage both adherence to Rome and cooperation among local elites. The Romans had a contractual view of religion, encapsulated by the phrase, do ut des, that is, I give so that you will give. The gods would bestow their blessings if, and only if, they received the proper sacrifices and prayers, regardless of what the men making those sacrifices and prayers believed. Religious and political practice, in short, were never distinct.
The Roman ruling class get there by being voted for by people. And it's an even more direct relationship than with modern politicians. I mean, maybe the media expose modern politicians in some ways, but they constantly have to see these people face to face, and they have to make an impact on them. So they're all in the business of arousing cheers.
Making his own PR.
Absolutely. They're as concerned with spin as any modern politician.
Romans hated the very word king. 600 years before, there'd been 7 kings of Rome, and the last, Tarquin, had been such a tyrant, they'd got rid of him and set up the Republic instead.
I'm quite certain that Caesar didn't want to be a king. Caesar knew Roman history extremely well, and first steps in Roman history is we kill kings. We don't like kings. We had them once in the past. There were 7 of them. 7's a good round number, and 7 is enough.
Plotters ran through the streets proclaiming freedom, but the people of Rome didn't want freedom. They loved Caesar and turned out in their thousands in the Forum to honor him when his body was cremated. They wanted another emperor.
Though he watered down Caesar's popular reforms, Augustus would always use the strong association with the beloved dictator to provide legitimacy to his new and considerably more oligarch-friendly regime. And each of his successors would, in turn, even use his personal name, Gaius, as their own. The centerpiece of the Capitol Rotunda in Washington, D.C., adorning the inside of the building's iconic dome, is a massive fresco called the Apotheosis of Washington, depicting America's first president literally rising to the heights of godhood. In this painting, Washington is escorted by lictors bearing fasces and wearing the insignia of a Roman general in triumph. Beside him, in this heavenly realm, are the Roman gods Minerva, Neptune, Mercury, Vulcan, and Ceres. It's easy and probably wise to dismiss this painting as merely, or mostly, symbolic. But who's to say that this is not how many Romans would have thought of the newly divine Caesar?
The Romans have to invent something new. The rulers have to create something new. And so they create a new status. Who is the model for them?
As is usually the case, it was essential for the state and for the king or emperor, whose authority and legitimacy often rested on his connection to the gods or his role as supervisor of the cult. We are limited to the perspectives of only one section of the population, the elites mostly, because they were the ones that had the ability to read and write these things down. Not only that, but we're also limited to the particular things that they thought were important to write down and document, which in many cases might have been the least important things. The kings willingly glorify themselves, notably in their dedicatory and commemorative inscriptions, for their zeal in religious behavior, frequently taking the titles of curators and servants of the sanctuaries. End of quote. Indeed, the annual New Year celebration in Babylon would culminate in a scene where the king was literally dragged by his ear by one of the priests into the sanctuary of Marduk and then made to kneel and say prayers of praise, sort of emphasizing his role as servant, that he was serving the god. And it was obviously a very direct way of connecting political rule with the religious cult in order to legitimize the king through ritualizing. The historian Piotr Mikalovsky writes, quote, Mesopotamian kings, similar to monarchs in many other times and cultures, were first and foremost mediators between the mundane and transcendent orders. Brute force aside, all other royal attributes derived from this function. End quote. The patronage of a god was a significant factor in the empire or kingdom. It seems that the earliest cities in Mesopotamia essentially grew from places of worship of particular gods, which expanded and became more powerful, and that these locales and cults eventually were systematized into a single system.
The taxation and redistribution of food supplies led to the formation of governments. Native architecture was burned and destroyed, followed by the construction of buildings in the Uruk style, the earliest noted occurrence of organized warfare. These military leaders are said to have been the first kings, or lugals, literally great men.
Finding direct evidence of conflict in prehistory is often difficult. Archaeology is good at finding sustained occupation at a site, with the remains of walls, hearth fires, pottery, animal bones, and other artifacts there in the ground. But acts of violence between people occurs incredibly briefly by comparison. It's clear that people were moving from their villages into the city itself. After all, it's a process we've seen happen all over the world in the thousands of years since, especially in the last 200 years or so. Raids on neighbouring settlements might have driven people together in greater concentrations. Small, isolated villages would be more vulnerable to sudden attack than larger settlements. But it's possible raiders would have been after that other great resource of this fertile region, people. It was common for people to be enslaved due to an inability to pay their debts. Impoverished, widowed mothers sold their children. Some people sold themselves into slavery, and criminals could be enslaved. But slaves were also taken in war. Some researchers argue that kingship as a concept may have emerged out of military leadership. While the early cities might have been organized by priests and temple bureaucracies, armed defense and military campaigns might have been led by another kind of figure. Perhaps a temporary war leader was selected who had military rather than political control. Over time, perhaps due to the increasing importance of warfare, the nature of these positions changed, became permanent, and then hereditary. The chief Sumerian gods tended to have military functions. Enlil, the high god, was described as he who breaks the enemy like a reed. Famously, the goddess of love, Inanna, known to the Akkadians as Ishtar, was also a goddess of war, and war was carried out in their name, led by their representative on earth, the king. When to Lugal-Zaghazi, king of Uruk, king of the land, king of countries, Enlil had given the kingship of the land, made the land obedient to him, thrown all countries at his feet, and subjected them to him from sunrise to sunset. At that time he made his way from the lower sea, which is the Persian Gulf, via the Tigris and Euphrates to the upper sea, which is the Mediterranean. And Enlil allowed none to oppose him from sunrise to sunset. Under him all countries lay contented in their meadows, and the land rejoiced.
If a man gouges another man's eye, then his eye must be gouged out. A famous adage that inspired the Bible. To build their Garden of Eden, the Sumerians scoured the world in search of commodities they didn't possess. The gods inspired fear and respect. They symbolized the Sumerians' age-old distrust of nature.
Toynbee argues that in conditions that are too comfortable, people have little need of increased social organization or technological development, and in conditions that are too harsh, society finds it impossible to develop. He argues that it's in environments such as southern Iraq, where the challenges are numerous but not overwhelming, that a cradle of civilization can occur. Walter Benjamin would one day write that there is no record of civilization that is not at the same time a record of barbarism. The slaving city of Lagash went on to conquer much of southern Mesopotamia. Lagash established what some historians have called the first true empire in the world, and all the kings of Mesopotamia in Babylon and Assyria for the next 2,000 years would rule under a title that gave them a kind of ancient legitimacy, reaching right back to the First Age.
The greater good, to worship the state, not the person. It wasn't their abilities, it was their mere power, regardless of people's beliefs. In voting, it was even more direct than the modern politicians, and we have to create a republic, not a kingship. Caesar didn't want to be a king. See, the people of Rome after Caesar died, they didn't want freedom, they wanted another ruler. Whether they think that they're part of the gods or not is irrelevant. It was never abolished. People just didn't want to pay attention to it anymore. The nature of these positions changed, became permanent, and then hereditary. The rulers have to create a new status. Political and religious practice were never distinct. Every successor would use the previous for their legitimacy. Oh, is this idolatry according to Christianity? Well, let's merge religion and state, and we are your servants, but none is allowed to oppose me, and everyone under me is perfectly content, but they're not allowed to oppose me. To build our Garden of Eden, and though we have a distrust for nature, we're going to replace nature with our own authority. We're going to write the history because we are the authority. And so there's a lot at question here because we're looking at thousands of years of history. And war might be hard to trace, as you heard, but if we look at the mainstream narrative of where these civilizations come from, and even if we look at the psychology and the anthropology as we shared before, a lot of this starts to make sense. And I want to ask you a question. If old times were harsh and they required conflict and war, who's to say we still need conflict and war? Are we not improving? Why aren't we? Take a look at this roadmap to world history. This goes over a lot of what we've seen for the past 4,000 years. If you do a simple search, you'll see the first ever government is Sumeria, and the first form of systemic slavery is also Sumeria. If you look at the basic structure of Sumeria, you have the bottom class, the slaves, the middle class, the merchants, and the upper class, the priest or the priest kings. That's where the idea of the divine right to rule came from. And again, if you do other searches on most search engines, it'll come up right away. It's right there on the Wikipedia as well, even asking AI. Now, isn't it interesting that the first governments were also the first form of systemic slavery? How is that so? Notice these comments. A common non-military reason to build city walls was to collect tolls. I really like the theory of James C. Scott that these ancient cities, because of diseases, lost population, so they required extra population to keep them going. This meant that conquering people to get slaves was required for these cities or empires to survive. If you look into the disease and population problem, he talks about this through his work, and he says that early states are population machines where rulers focused obsessively on the productivity and number of domesticated subjects. It says that this created a vicious cycle where states were continuously losing people both to disease and to voluntary flight. People regularly escaped to areas and non-state societies to avoid taxes, conscription, and labor. So people were trying to get away from the government, but the government was like, no, you have to believe in this. And through the cult indoctrination, people put up with it. You'll see across many different works this idea of conquest, prison capture. Jean Bodin talks about the earliest political societies blended together, the concepts of subjecthood, slavery, patriarchy, and vassalage, rendering them indistinguishable from slavery. There's even something called the sociological conquest theory, which talks about this whole idea, and in Oppenheimer's research, it revealed that there's no primitive state known to history originated in any other manner other than conquest. It says this means all states emerged from violence and coercion, not from voluntary social contracts or natural evolution. It says institutionalized violence. We also call slavery an institution. And indeed, the government claims a higher authority than the slave masters who claim an authority over their slaves. Oppenheimer even distinguished the difference between economic means, which is voluntary exchange and production, and political means, which is coercion and expropriation. And if you look at the ways you make a slave and you look at the ways you make a government, they look virtually the same. You'd even see that in ancient empires, those who became enslaved would later become citizens through the process of manumission or enfranchisement. In other words, meaning that people require permission to be free, which means they're not really free. And you might just say this is all coincidence, but look even further. Not even 200 years ago, we had the anti-slavery or abolitionist movement in America, and you had individuals like George Fitzhugh, who was a leading pro-slavery advocate, who literally said all government is slavery. The proper subject of investigation for philosophers and for philanthropists is the existing mode of government adapted to the wants of its subjects. He makes all the arguments that people make for their government, saying it's there to protect us, and help constrain that dangerous freedom. So little do most people who are statists do they know that they're literally making arguments that pro-slavery advocates made in the 1800s. He says that the slavery principle is almost the only principle of government, and that barbarians and savages need and will submit to but few and simple laws and little of government. If you look at the work of Martin Luther King Jr., he says slavery in America was perpetrated not merely by human badness, but also by human blindness. Accustom him to rigid discipline, demand from him unconditional submission, impress upon him a sense of his innate inferiority, develop in him a paralyzing fear. Human beings cannot continue to do wrong without eventually reaching out for some rationalization to clothe their acts in the garments of righteousness. This is also why statism is equated to the idea of mental slavery, the most dangerous form, or a covert slavery as opposed to the overt ball and chains chattel slavery, the one that most people think of when they hear the word slavery. And if you put the pro-slavery arguments next to the pro-government arguments, they also look practically the same. And did you know that the slave patrol has its roots among modern-day policing? In fact, the badges look quite similar. You can see there's these charts on the screen. 1861, it's my right to force other people to work in my fields. In 2012, it's my right to force other people to pay for what I want. What's really the difference there? The abolitionists of the past were under no obligation to explain how society would work without slavery. Well, the abolitionists of the present are under no such obligation either, both of which understand that slavery is wrong and has to end. You'll notice the anarchist symbol there behind that image, because this is ultimately the position of the philosophical anarchist, but the word anarchy just means no ruler, not no rules. And in my book, Slavery Gone for Good, Black Book Edition, I go into this whole perspective from the abolitionist and breaking down basic concepts like freedom and rights and ownership to help us see this historical picture. Oh, and did I mention that the American abolitionists were also among the first anarchists in history? I also wrote a book on Taoism from ancient China, because these were considered some of the first anarchists in history. Now, they weren't considered chaotic. These were monks who were meditating and looking at the natural order of the world, and they called that system Tao. You have other researchers like Alan Watts and Osho who brought these teachings to the modern day, and they also shared these sentiments. I even go over untold documents from ancient times where they talk about this idea that there shouldn't be a government. Not to mention Leo Tolstoy, known as one of the greatest writers of all time, support this premises. And because there's so much evidence regarding this issue, I have created the End of Slavery Summit with over 40 or actually 50 speakers on the subject. And it's not just that you can compare slavery with government, but they could also compare it with gangs and mafia. Larkin Rose says that what distinguishes a street gang from government is how they are perceived by the people they control. They do not perceive the street thug to be any sort of legitimate rightful ruler. They do not imagine him to have authority. So the loot the thug collects is not referred to as taxes, and his threats are not called laws. When government does it, it uses not only threats but also indoctrination of both the enforcers and the general public. The government message involves a great deal of psychology and mind control, which is essential to making the state mercenaries feel righteous about inflicting oppression on others. Those who administer retribution against any who disobey the politicians are portrayed not merely as hired thugs, but as noble law enforcers. Now, it's worth noting that Larkin Rose read Frederick Douglass, which is how he understood this whole superstition to begin with. And he did not expect to be an anarchist, quote unquote. Really, what this comes down to is recognizing who we merely are, which doesn't mean anarchist, doesn't mean conservative, liberal, libertarian, or whatever, but merely ourselves. Again, the ability to see things the way they are. If you're looking at a mafia and you're looking at a government, there's not much of a difference between the two, but people perceive that there is a difference between the two, and the indoctrination that we have through our Prussian model of schooling helps teach us that government is not a mafia, so they're allowed to continue their crimes. You'll see, just like in the ancient world, we build statues of certain figures as though to deify them. People are taking photos, there's tourists going there, there's even people comparing Rome with America. There are plenty of videos and graphics talking about this comparison. And some people say that Rome never fell and that it actually just transitioned into something like the Roman Catholic Church, or that, frankly, just America is taking on Rome 2.0. And I think it's worth worth looking at just how much we've been through this game in human history. The number of rulers who have existed in human history likely exceeds 50,000, potentially reaching up to 100,000, when including all monarchs, emperors, kings, pharaohs, sultans, tribal chiefs, dictators, similar dominative leaders over the past 6,000 years in kingdoms, empires, principalities, states worldwide. And for the number of governments, there's also no precise total, but it's estimated to be in the tens of thousands, at least 20,000 to 50,000 distinct governments or political entities. And yet people think that their country is the best and the only one and meant to be. Did we not think that we were also meant to be when we were in Rome? Look at the longest lasting empires or governments. 1,800 years, 1,700 years, 1,100 years. I mean, America is not even half of some of these. And not to mention that a lot of these dynasties and empires just merged into one another, and that conflict and war and civil war just made new versions of the old version. And yet we want to talk about Mao and Hitler and Stalin and Obama and Trump. Look at the list of all these dictators in history. How many of them have you even heard of? And then go ahead, try to look up kind and successful rulers in history. But you can easily look up all the things that they did, which was certainly not kind. The truth is, you're not going to ever have a perfect system created by man because they're not permanent, they're not universal, they're not encompassing all of reality. They can't have the truth wholly. This is what cults claim to do. Why are we falling into it?
I'm sorry. But I don't want to be an emperor. That's not my business. I don't want to rule or conquer anyone. I should like to help everyone if possible. Jew, Gentile, black man, white. We all want to help one another. Human beings are like that. We want to live by each other's happiness, not by each other's misery. We don't want to hate and despise one another. In this world, there's room for everyone, and the good earth is rich and can provide for everyone. The way of life can be free and beautiful, but we have lost the way. Greed has poisoned men's souls, has barricaded the world with hate, has goose-stepped us into misery and bloodshed. We have developed speed, but we have shut ourselves in. Machinery that gives abundance has left us in want. Our knowledge has made us cynical, our cleverness hard and unkind. We think too much and feel too little. More than machinery, we need humanity. More than cleverness, we need kindness and gentleness. Without these qualities, life will be violent, and all will be lost. The aeroplane and the radio have brought us closer together. The very nature of these inventions cries out for the goodness in men, cries out for universal brotherhood, for the unity of us all. Even now, my voice is reaching millions throughout the world, millions of despairing men, women, and little children, victims of a system that makes men torture and imprison innocent people. To those who can hear me, I say, do not despair. The misery that is now upon us is but the passing of greed, the bitterness of men who fear the way of human progress. The hate of men will pass and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish. Soldiers, don't give yourselves to brutes, men who despise you, enslave you, who regiment your lives, tell you what to do, what to think, and what to feel, who drill you, diet you, treat you like cattle, use you as cannon fodder. Don't give yourselves to these unnatural men with machine minds and machine hearts. You are not machines. You are not cattle. You are men. You have the love of humanity in your hearts. You don't hate, only the unloved hate, the unloved and the unnatural. Soldiers, don't fight for slavery, fight for liberty. In the 17th chapter of St. Luke it is written, the kingdom of God is within man, not one man nor a group of men, but in all men, in you. You, the people, have the power to create machines, the power to create happiness. You, the people, have the power to make this life free and beautiful, to make this life a wonderful adventure. Then in the name of democracy, let us use that power. Let us all unite. Let us fight for a new world, a decent world, that will give men a chance to work, that will give youth a future and old age a security. By the promise of these things, brutes have risen to power, but they lie. They do not fulfill that promise. They never will. Dictators free themselves, but they enslave the people. Now let us fight to fulfill that promise. Let us fight to free the world, to do away with national barriers, to do away with greed, with hate and intolerance. Let us fight for a world of reason, a world where science and progress will lead to all men's happiness. Soldiers, in the name of democracy, let us all unite!
That first step is always the hardest, to get someone to dare to set aside his blind faith long enough to think about things, to back up enough to say, maybe government isn't even legitimate at all. It takes a lot for people indoctrinated into the faith to dare to think of those literally blasphemous ideas that, no, those people in Washington don't have the right to rule. Their threats aren't laws, they're just threats. Their demands aren't taxes, it's just extortion. And that really feels like heresy, because it is. It is heresy against the God called government. I now have a huge amount of hope, because I see an acceleration of the number of people who dare to think about these things, and now the number of people able to have this conversation is just hugely exploding. And they're still a minority, but that exponential curve, I don't think it's stopping. I really think the cult of statism is as good as dead. Ultimately, I think the belief in government is doomed for the exact same reasons that the belief in a flat earth was doomed. There's too many people pointing out the utter inherent insanity in the belief, and that's just not going to go away. Nobody who understands self-ownership and understands why authority is inherently bogus wakes up the next day and says, suddenly, I think I should do whatever the politicians say. I think really humanity is just beginning to wake up to what it's supposed to be. Humanity wasn't meant to be a domesticated species owned by a ruling class. Every human being owns himself, is in charge of his own life. I'd like to see actual rational moral civilization in my lifetime, but we are going to get there. Sooner or later, we are totally going to get there. The lie will never outlive the truth forever.
Just say no to gangs. I couldn't have said it any better, or maybe I could have. What they need to do is just say no to cults. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the principles that I personally live my life by is never give someone else advice that you haven't followed yourself. Well, you know what, ladies and gentlemen? I'm about to give some really important advice to all the order followers out there today. And I can do it because I followed that advice and I already did it. Quit your cult.
World peace, justice, freedom, you can have it. But I'll tell you the price. I'll tell you what it's going to cost you if you really want that. Give up the cult of statism and embrace humanity. We have rich and poor and everything in between, and Christians, Jews, Muslims, atheists, agnostics, some religions I haven't even heard of before, men and women, old and young, all sorts of races. We have gun-toters and pacifists, gay and straight, a whole bunch of different personalities, different interests, different priorities, different beliefs. And we do disagree on a lot of things, which is why we like to stand around discussing, even arguing, but we get along.
And so this could be seen as a form of true tolerance or true honesty, being as real as we can with others, standing in our own ground like, yeah, I'm going to have my own opinions, you're going to have your own, I'm going to respect that of yours. I want to be free, you want to be free, I'm going to respect your freedom because I also want to be free. It's applying the golden rule in full force. This has a lot to do with morality, not that it needs to be specifically defined, as that can cause problems of fanaticism on its own, but nonetheless a moral development that is attained through the discipline of understanding cult behavior, understanding stuff like statism and boundaries and mind control or anything of the related sort. If you look at Auburn Herbert, who is known among the founder of voluntarism, which is a more specific understanding of philosophical anarchism, he says if you lose your own will and self-guidance and control over your own lives and actions, what can all the buying and trafficking, what can all the gifts of politicians give you in return? You'll even see a flowchart of without government, who would provide blank. And there's been many books from the Mises Institute, from Austrian economics, from even people who are opposed to capitalist point of views, people who totally disagree with each other, communists, syndicalists, you can think anything you want regarding the economy, but the moral foundation should be shared, which is that nobody has the right to rule over one another, and that there are tons of books talking about how a free society would work, and that people can engage with their own financial preferences. If they want to use crypto, or they don't want to use any money at all, and they want to just rely on spiritual faith, they can do it, as long as they're not forcing other people to do it as well. Notice this quote: that moral sense whose supremacy will make society harmonious and government unnecessary is the same moral sense which will then make each man assert his freedom, even to the extent of ignoring the state, eventually render government impossible. He says as fast as voluntary cooperation is abandoned, compulsory cooperation must be substituted. And by the way, he's also someone known for coining the term survival of the fittest. So when people say it's going to be law of the jungle, survival of the fittest, the guy who literally coined the term is relatively an anarchist. Wade Horn, a psychologist, said that in order to abolish modern day slavery, we have to have the cooperation of the victims. Again, we have to talk with one another. We have to have compassion. We have to listen, and we have to approach people as humans if we want them to be humans. Herbert Spencer goes on and says, after men's minds have been for many years thus exercised and stimulated, a sufficiently intense manifestation of feeling is produced, and then comes the reform. The law of social forms is that they shall be expressive of national character. They come into existence bearing its impress, and they live only so long as it supplies them with vitality. So when people are wondering how do we change the world, we have to open the hearts and minds of people, shift the culture, shift the narrative, the ideas, because the ideas of government is what keeps government in action. Even though people debate the symptoms and the problems within the government, that moral foundation doesn't get questioned, which is also why Adin Ballou, a 19th century abolitionist and anarchist, differentiated between moral power and political power. And moral power is that which operates on human affections, passions, reasons, and moral sentiment without force, whereas political power uses state authority to threaten and subject through physical force and laws. And he actually says moral power is far more influential. This is why civil disobedience methods have been very effective in history, and also why Larkin Rose has a course called Candles in the Dark, where he teaches others how to talk to one another by just asking questions through the Socratic method. Even when you study Mark Passio's works, there's positive and negative natural law expressions, and on the positive side is love, knowledge, sovereignty, freedom, and order. So we have to be open, we have to have love, and that's how we can have one be accepting of what we have to share with them. That's how we can share knowledge, and then that's how we can become free. Notice he calls it an internal monarchy, internal one ruler, for an external anarchy. External, nobody's in control of anybody else. Benjamin Franklin said, any society that will give up a little liberty to gain a little security will deserve neither and lose both. Another quote from a founding father says, educate and inform the whole mass of the people. They are the only sure reliance for the preservation of our liberty. These quotes are true. That doesn't mean everything they did was true, but it's worth learning from those quotes. Now, when you typically look at a political spectrum, you might see something like this. And if you notice on the no government side, it says Thomas Hobbes, solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short life. But the truth is that there's endless political factions. Just go online and look at different comment threads and also talk to different people. Nobody can all agree on the same thing. This is actually the real political spectrum. This is also from Mark Passio, and he says it's a function of consciousness and morality. It's not saying there is a specific idea or a specific ideology. All it's saying is that no one should be masters and that no one should be slaves. It's a specifically psychological perspective, and if we're going to understand anarchism, it's best through the lens of voluntarism, perhaps, since it looks specifically at consent as the main driving force as to why people should be free. It sees self-determination and personal responsibility as the only actual guarantee of sane and rational conduct. And the only way that we cannot have oligarchies and tyrannies is to not deal as collectives, but deal as individuals, treat people as people. But to those people who think that you consent to the government, you might want to show them someone like Lysander Spooner, who was a 19th century abolitionist and anarchist, who wrote a book called No Trees in the Constitution of No Authority. From a lawyer, legal perspective, and a moral, natural law perspective, he shares how you never actually gave consent. You'll notice David Hume calling the social contract a convenient fiction. In the concept of tacit consent, which is what this is, it isn't true consent. the idea that you just live within a territory and you're enjoying its benefits, so you therefore automatically consent, this is a matter of circular reasoning. Just look up the definition of consent. Consent is clear, coherent, willing, and ongoing. You can't just assume the consent of someone else, especially if they're born into this world and you make them sign a bunch of papers and you also pump them full of a bunch of chemicals. Like, what are we doing here? If you look at this chart, it compares statism with voluntarism, making the distinctions very clear. It's worth noting that when Charlie Chaplin mentioned the word democracy, that could be practiced voluntarily. In fact, people look at democracy in that way, but through government, it is not practiced voluntarily. So it can be seen in a good way, but let's not get it twisted with the fact that it's often used for government agendas as well. And to those who think that this is pushing some sort of ideology or agenda, this dialogue portrays it quite well. Voluntarist, I guess I just don't want to live in your world. And he responds saying, that's fine. The problem is that you want me to live in yours. And if people don't understand this perspective, it's because they're not able to see the bigger picture. Like, hey, we can disagree. I just don't want your will imposed on mine, and I don't want to impose my will on yours. We need to come to an understanding of actual unity, which is that I have no country to die for. My country is the earth. I am a citizen of the world, which consists of only one race, the human race. I do not stand with Israel. I do not stand with Hamas. I do not stand with Ukraine. I do not stand with Russia. I stand with the individuals who are held hostage by government. This not only makes sense of truth and reality, but it makes moral sense as well, because you can't look at everyone and say they're all bad or they're all good. Here's a chart comparing voluntarism with common philosophical ideas when it comes to government, like conservatism and socialism and minarchism, which is the idea of a limited government. So you might want to ask yourself, is this really utopian to suggest that people can live voluntarily? Most people already live voluntarily in all of their life, with the exception only being with politics. And how much does politics start to invade our lives the more attention and energy we give toward it? Is it utopia to believe that people can best run their own lives? Or is it utopia to believe that people whom you likely never met can best run the lives of others, and that they have the best idea of how the whole world should work? J.R.R. Tolkien, who wrote The Lord of the Rings, also understood this, and he said, my political opinions lean more and more to anarchy. The most improper job of any man, even saints, is bossing other men. Not one in a million is fit for it, and least of all those who seek the opportunity. I even did a whole seminar talking about The Lord of the Rings, and he even has the most darkest force, Melkor, which literally translates to king, and the ring is known as the Ring of Power, and the only ones who could destroy it were the hobbits from the Shire, which had no government, and they were the freest, happiest, most innocent people that were able to destroy it, and even them would get corrupted by the ring at the end of the movie. But they finally released the ring, and then it all got destroyed, and then everybody lived in peace, and they're literally known as the free people. But voluntarism could also be understood through other ideas like agorism or the non-aggression principle, understanding you should never do violence to one another. It could just be said as anarchy, but that word has kind of gotten a bad rep. But what most people think anarchy is savage citizens in a free-for-all devoid of government's loving guidance, which is certainly not always loving. And what it actually is peaceful citizens coexisting through voluntary interaction, like you see at these massive markets or grocery stores. There's so much organization involved, and yet it's all voluntary. I liken this reality to that of understanding complexity and uniqueness among human beings, and not trying to create a perfect blank slate. Take a look at the perfect lawn that we might have in front of our houses. Instead, we could have gardens. We can be growing food, but people aren't taught that in school. We lack biodiversity in our front yard and among our food and among its bacteria and its nutrients, and so we lack a complex mind, and a mind that is free, that is able to discipline and entertain different ideas. This is what I explore in the book called Natural Intelligence, this idea of permaculture, which also has its own ethics-based system. Just like natural law, just like voluntarism, just like the non-aggression principle, they're all ways to get to the same truth. And if you want to delve deeper into the problems and the roots to our systems and our world, I would recommend the Pyramid of Power series by the Conscious Resistance Network. I would also recommend the Corbett Report, where he has many videos that are well researched, and he has a whole section on his website for solutions. Another great resource is Brighteon.com, which is an alternative to YouTube and other video platforms, and Brighteon.ai, which is an alternative to ChatGPT and AI. And if you were to ask me personally how I see we can change the world, I believe it can happen within 4 steps. But we first have to understand, how do we end the greatest evil? I use 2 quotes from Leo Tolstoy and Henry David Thoreau, where they make it very clear the answer is saying no, just like Mark Passio said, but doing en masse. That is, if you are in the government or you're not, just saying no, I'm not going to pay taxes, I'm not going to uphold this position, I'm going to stop. And Henry David Thoreau said there can be a very peaceful revolution if people know how to do that. Now, how much will it take? I use quotes from Martin Luther King Jr. and William Lloyd Garrison. And Martin Luther King Jr. said that Mahatma Gandhi had not more than 100 persons absolutely committed. You look at most revolutions per se in history, it's not a whole much of the population, but they eventually have a lot of sway over the majority of the population. Garrison's approach was to reach as many people as possible with the message, because in that way people are less likely to cause problems when they're all together and they see other people agreeing with them. It makes them want to agree, and then it makes more impact overall. Of course, there are many approaches to this, and what do we teach the generations to come? I use a quote from Larkin Rose, because really what matters here is our children. As you see, when it comes to understanding governments and cults, the very first one that we're exposed to is the public schooling system. So what are my 4 steps? Well, simply put, represent, educate, defend, and show. I have it on the screen for you, and I encourage that you pause and read over these, as it's quite simple. It can be done using certain materials, certain pieces of land that you turn into community centers or organizations that you create. It could be done using permaculture and creating a food forest, and then inviting people to that land and then showing them a better way. It could be done documenting it with video and then inspiring other people to do the same. But either way, there has to be an emphasis on action. Action that is based on this understanding of the cult behavior. And we have to know who we are in this process so we don't just fall into another cult. The key rule here is to simply say, I do not consent. This is literally the most powerful affirmation you can use against the cabal, as it says on this image. Use it everywhere and often. The more people that declare this with intent, the less power they will have over your reality, anyone who claims to rule over you. And over the collective as a whole, you become more powerful in the sense of your true power, that is, your true self, because you have some sense of self-worth to say, I'm not going to become dependent, I'm not going to take my ego and have that be the ruler over me. I'm not going to let my desires take control over me. I'm going to be in control of myself and not control other people. I'm not even going into this documentary talking about the different families that run everything and the Federal Reserve System and how money gets created. Knowledge is power, which is why these regimes control it the most. It doesn't matter what regime it is. Problems are created and problems are solved, both by the same source, the government. Many of the problems caused by the state are then taken back. Oh, sorry, look, we love you, we will save you. When people talk about nationalism and other people say, look at globalism, these are just as bad as one another because they're both statism, just in extreme forms. I like to summarize statism as fanaticism, idolatry, heteronomy, and simply contradictive morality. From studying these cult dynamics, you might see why an atheist or a religious individual might have great power in their argumentation around this notorious cult. Because the atheist may say, well, the state is worshipped like a god and I don't worship any gods. Or the religious individual will say it's idolatry to worship any god other than the god that isn't government. Isn't it interesting how much Caesar was worshipped back in his day? But nowadays, he has nothing but Caesar salad, C-section, and maybe July and August. It just shows you how power is really not all that worth it. Looking at ancient history, we can also understand why rulers today might use symbolism and the occult, considering their foundation conditions, reinforcing all the people who make up theories about what they believe in and what they actually are doing. It seems quite sad to me that we would model our whole reality and our current systems off of some barbaric system of the past in deserts that don't seem very hospitable. And to some sense, you might have sympathy for those people of the past because their tough conditions created tough mindsets that didn't really breed compassion. Whether populations invaded for resource or survival or just power alone is irrelevant. We don't need any of these excuses. It's a scarcity mindset. Rulers are often depicted as leading the charge symbolically or literally, and it's easier to conquer than it is to rule. It never lasts. Just because someone might be more favorable, more polite, or have the power to rule does not mean that it won't share the same outcome as if they didn't, or that they have the right to rule to begin with. It is as if people want to be fooled in this way because they want a good ruler, but they still want a ruler. So in a way, they're just delaying or distracting from the inevitable reality. The true Christian is like the true American. It has been talked about so much that people constantly fall back on it, and yet it's not true as in truth. Not only do effective candidates appeal and mix multiple ideas to make their own agenda, but the truth itself is a mix of truth between all the political spectrums. The more someone can replicate the truth in this way, the more deceiving it becomes. There is no thinking of actual truth beyond nations and ideologies when every regime is based off of wars and reputation from the previous regime. I have gratitude for living in America, per se. But I recognize we have to do better, and that there were stepping stones in history toward becoming better. I believe we can always do better, not just personally, but collectively. And people will make excuses, but people are herd animals. That's who they are. They follow orders. Just because they are doing that right now does not mean they ought to be doing that forever. And it doesn't mean that's truly satisfying or fulfilling for them or the human race at large. Do you not have something to aspire to within your life? When we talked about political slavery or government, it's a cult that you cannot escape. It's one that is always coercive. That's why I call it the most dangerous cult of all. And when you look at the cult of academia, people assume Sumeria is first, or that we should only talk about the leader, Hitler, Stalin, Mao. But I'm emphasizing looking at the follower. I'm emphasizing looking at hidden history. I'm emphasizing looking at hidden ideas and encouraging you to think for yourself. That's all I want you to do at the end of the day. You don't have to agree with me, but I hope that you got some value out of watching this. Through the course of this documentary, we mentioned school, academia, religion, science, medicine, celebrities in Hollywood, consumerism in the media, in sports, and many other topics within. But I want you to ask the question, what happens when the government gets involved with these fields of study? When it becomes state science, when it becomes state medicine, or state schooling, or state academia, when the state becomes the celebrity, when they want you to consume a certain product, when they control the media, when they act like sports teams and you have to choose between red and blue. There's a reason why I call this the biggest cult, and what I just discussed among all these different documentary parts is what I call the mainstream cults. We ought to be cautious about creating alternatives because we might engage in cult-like behavior without knowing so when we're trying to create those alternatives. So I encourage you to reflect on yourself constantly, and I thank you very much for watching.